Game of Thrones escape game. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 201 Astapor. Astapor is located at the mouth of a winding river, which the Astapori call the Worm River, which flows into the Slavers Bay from the east. To its south are the Ghis Mountains, where the ruins of the ancient city of Ghis are hidden. According to Darren's judgment, Ian and his fleet are less than half a day's sail away from the city. It took Ian a month to sail from the west side of the Valyrian peninsula to Astapor. Originally, they could arrive about 3 or 4 days earlier than now, but after entering the Gulf of Sorrow, Ian deliberately asked Darren to slow down slightly. In this way, he delayed the arrival of Astapor until after the settlement day of the 5th month. This time he received 40 points, 4888 gold dragons, 1 in the area, self-selected S-level NPC. In this way, Ian's wealth once again exceeded 100,000 gold dragons. With this money, even if Ian did not rely on dragons, he could have bought almost all the Unsullied in Astapor. But there is also bad news. There are only 22 players left, which means that his leaderboard rewards are at most 2 months left. In the middle of last month, a big event happened in Volantis. The box of bounty mission 2 in Volantis was found, and 3 players were eliminated within 1 day. Ian initially judged that 2 or 3 players who were dominant in Volantis on that day launched an ultimate showdown. Of course, the players who found the box of bounty mission 2 until this time no longer posed a big threat to Ian. In comparison, Ian's real enemy was the player forces who got the box in Old Town and the group of people who were causing trouble in the north. Without further entanglement with other players, Ian logged into the system. He was going to start drawing S cards for the next 2 months. The first set of 3 cards he obtained were Black Goat Cavalry of Koha, which had been runner-up twice, Unsullied Spearmaster, and Champion Gladiator of Meereen, which had been runner-up once. This result is a bit too much, but considering that the number of S-level NPCs cultivated by the system is limited, it is understandable that those who I didn't want and were not chosen by other players were repeatedly drawn by me. What the hell is understandable? NPCs are in the region. I drew them in Pentus. I drew them in Tirosh. How can I draw them in Astapor? Are these guys following me? There must be something shady here. Although Ian cursed the system, he had no way to report the shady dealings, so he could only accept his fate and choose Champion Gladiator of Meereen. Black Goat Rider of Koha. He had rejected it twice, and this time he was completely determined. I just didn't want him. And Unsullied Spearmaster. Damn, I'm about to buy all the Unsullied. What's the point of having one more? Anyway, the loyalty of the Unsullied is not inferior to that of the NPC. Soon, a data card appeared in front of Ian. Sama, Strength 36, Agility 38, Spirit 1, Scimitar Mastery, Advanced Swordsmanship, Intermediate Riding, Equipment, Scimitar of Ghis. Sure enough, my luck has always been good, and my agility is slightly above the standard. Ian nodded, acknowledging the result this time, and then clicked on the second card. This group became Black Goat Cavalry of Koha, which came to run with him for the 4th time, Unsullied Spearmaster, which came to run with him for the 3rd time, and a new card, Dothraki Bloodgood. Ian didn't even look at the attributes of the new card Bloodgood, and directly clicked to select. Quigo, Strength 33, Agility 35, Spirit 1, Arak Scimitar Mastery, Bow Mastery, Riding Mastery, Equipment, Arak Scimitar, Dothraki Trotter, Composite Bow. Quigo's attributes are relatively average, but his skill proficiency is not at all unworthy of the S-level evaluation. Later, Ian learned from Anne that the Champion Gladiator Sama was in Astapor, and the Blood Ridder Quigo could reach Astapor within 10 days. From this time, Ian could judge that Quigo was in Meereen at the moment. After arranging for the NPC to find his own problem, Ian exited the system and came to the deck. About 4 hours later, the Kiss of the Breeze goddess slowly approached the port of Astapor. The huge statue of the harpy on the harbor gate appeared in Ian's vision. It had a woman's body, bat wings, eagle legs and scorpion tail, and its claws were holding open handcuffs. The harpy is the symbol of the ancient Ghis Empire. It was once one of the most powerful empires in the world. As early as when the Valyrian freehold was still in primitive society, the Ghis Empire had already created a very glorious civilization. However, the Valyrians later obtained the dragon. With this advantage, they defeated the Ghis Empire in 5 major wars and destroyed the latter more than 5,000 years ago. After the fall of Ghis, the Valyrians spread salt, sulfur and bones over every inch of its land to prevent any survivors from returning. Although the people of Astapa today call themselves the Sons of the Harpy, they no longer have the pure blood of Ghis. Their official language is a dialect of High Valyrian, and their harpies no longer hold the lightning of the ancient empire, but shackles. Ian suddenly thought that, if someone from the ancient Ghis Empire saw the 3 cities of Slavers Bay today, they would probably be as heartbroken as the Romans saw Italy later. Ian, Celia's voice interrupted Ian's thoughts. Your queen does not accept your suggestion to let her stay on the ship. Although Ian had warned Celia many times not to mention the word your queen in front of him, the warning did not work, but made her worse. She was obviously sure that Ian would not risk losing half of his points to deal with her because of such an insignificant matter. Ian had to admit that she guessed right. She said she wanted to talk to the good masters of Astapa in person. This is her duty as the queen. Celia continued. Duty? Ian held his forehead. This at least proves that she has listened to my lecture. So what is your decision? If you insist on her staying on the ship, I can help you convince her. We can take her with us. Ian shook his head and rejected Celia's proposal. Why? Do you intend to let her see how the good masters of Astapa treat slaves? Celia was a little surprised. She will see it sooner or later. I thought you would give her a process, not so direct. Celia smiled. How do you guarantee that she will not lose control? What can she lose control with? Legality aside, she is the only dragon rider you can rely on. Ian smiled but did not tell Celia that he had become a dragon spirit. Well, as long as you are happy. Celia shrugged. She knew the expression on Ian's face too well. When he caught her in the Red Temple in Pentus, he had this smile that deserved a beating. Whenever Ian showed this kind of smile, it meant that everything was under his control. So why should I worry about it? I was just an employee, and it was hard to say whether I could get the salary in the end. Celia left after she finished speaking. She had to arrange the whole set of arrangements for Daenerys's trip. Chapter 202 Pride Plaza. Led by 16 Astapa cavalrymen in front and behind, the carriage carrying Ian and Daenerys entered the Pride Square. Even from the most discerning point of view, the benefactors of Astapa gave Ian and his team enough pump this time. Yesterday, after the ship entered the port, Ian ordered the sailors who had been on the ship for more than 2 months. Actually, they were not very constrained to disembark, allowing them to freely spread the news that the Dragon Queen of the Sunset Land came to Astapa to buy the Unsullied. After the news spread and fermented overnight, this morning, the great benefactor Krasniemo Nakros sent an envoy to find Ian. After verifying that Ian and his team were indeed coming for the Unsullied, he invited them to go to Pride Square to see the goods. Unlike the arrogance shown by these slave traders when Daenerys came to Astapa from Karth in the original book, Ian showed his financial strength to the envoys from the beginning, and thus received the treatment that a big customer should have. Looking out from the carriage, Ian looked at these cavalrymen who served as guards. The cavalrymen were stout and had amber skin. They wore yellow silk cloaks on their shoulders with many shiny copper plates sewn on them. They wore no armor, but fancy embroidered linen shirts. They also wore no helmets, because they twisted their hair into various strange shapes, such as horns, wings, blades, and grasping hands. Ian didn't want to comment on the customs of the GI's people, but as a cavalryman, if he used trash to describe these things, Ian would be worried about tainting the word trash. Soon, Ian's carriage arrived at the center of the Pride Square. As soon as the carriage stopped, the great benefactor Krasniemo Nakros, who had walked down from the high platform in advance, came to Ian and his men. The slave trader smelled as if he had just taken a bath in black strawberry water, and his red and black forked beard was shiny with oil. Through the thin sea blue silk, Ian saw a pair of breasts that could make Daenerys feel ashamed, even though the other party was a man. Krasnies wore a toca robe with golden tassels, which was buckled on one side of his shoulder. He held the robe with his left hand while walking, and held a short whip in his right hand. At Krasnez's command, 2 slaves walked out from behind him, one high and one low, and lay in front of the carriage, to serve as a step for the distinguished guests on the carriage. However, the moment the curtain of the carriage was opened, the first person to appear was not Queen Daenerys or her Prime Minister, but a flashing black silhouette. The black shadow rushed out, first passing over the cavalry team beside the carriage, scaring the horses under their crotch, and the whole team was in chaos. Then it flew in front of Krasnez, and the wind brought by the dragon's wings instantly messed up the slave owner's funny forked beard. Finally, when the black shadow stopped on the top of Ian's carriage again, Krasnez and his men saw clearly that it was the dragon that had been extinct for more than 100 years in the legend, which caused them to exclaim. At the age of 2 months, Iron's wingspan has reached 1 meter. Although it looks smaller than ordinary birds of prey, it still looks majestic. The next moment, Iron walked out of the carriage, stepped on the slave sent by Krasnez, and came to the ground without hesitation, and then drove away 2 slaves. After that, Daenerys walked out of the carriage, and Iron directly reached out and hugged her down. Before you is Daenerys Targaryen I, Stormborn, Queen of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, ruler of the 7 kingdoms and protector of the realm, and the last Dragon King of Valyria. Role acted as an official to call the roll. The Last Dragon King of Valyria is a new title that Iron found for Daenerys, replacing the original Mother of Dragons. Her queen's hand, Raoul continued to call out the names, Apostle of the Red God, Dragon Caller, Early and Derry. This is Lord Krasnez Mo Nakris, who will provide his majesty with an army of Unsullied to restore his country. The little translator beside Krasnez first translated Raoul's words to Krasnez, and then introduced them. The girl spoke the common language well. She was less than 10 years old, with a flat round face, dark skin and golden eyes unique to the Nath people. She spoke to Ian instead of Daenerys. As a translator, her ability to read people's expressions was qualified. Ian recognized that this little black girl was Missandei. The TV series also arranged a love scene between her and the Unsullied Commander Grey Worm, but that was an arrangement after the characters' ages were deliberately raised in the TV series, otherwise it would be too cruel. Tell these barbarians from Westeros to come up to the platform with us, Krasnez said to Missandei. His high Valyrian was distorted by the thick throaty voice of Ghis, and mixed with the jargon of slave traders. The great Krasnez invites all the distinguished guests to come up to the platform to review our Unsullied, the little translator immediately invited. Then Ian and Daenerys followed Krasnez to the platform. Passing through the red brick fountain in the center of the square, a pungent smell of sulfur entered Ian's nose, and he had a hard time holding back a sneeze that would affect his image. At the same time, Ian swore to himself that he would tear down this unfortunate fountain later. Show them these soldiers. I bet even these barbarians can see how outstanding my batch of goods is. Master Krasnez asked, aren't they outstanding? The little translator said quickly. Ian looked down at the Pride Square, where 1,000 slave warriors were standing. They were lined up in 10 rows in front of the fountain and the majestic bronze harpy statue, with 100 people in each row. They stood straight and straight, staring straight ahead with emotionless eyes. They are just like a pile of bricks. Daenerys whispered beside Ian, what kind of army can be trained like this? The little queen praised the Unsullied to her vassal. The little translator immediately whispered to the slave owner, this Westeros sow is not blind. This doesn't show anything. Your Majesty, give me 1,000 male prostitutes, and I can make them stand in an orderly manner. Ian immediately said to Daenerys. But the Andal Knight refuted the queen's opinion, he said. The little translator hesitated. What did he say? He said that, if he gave him 1,000 male prostitutes, he could make them stand in an orderly manner. The little translator finally translated Ian's words truthfully. Krasnez almost got angry when he heard this. He had been selling Unsullied for so many years, but this was the first time he heard someone compare male prostitutes with Unsullied. Tell that ignorant barbarian. Tell him how excellent the Unsullied are. Krasnez couldn't even pretend to be polite. The whole world knows that the Unsullied are unparalleled in spears, shields, and daggers. Hearing this, the little translator began to introduce faithfully. Ian didn't listen carefully. He had already known what the Unsullied were through the original book, but he didn't interrupt the little translator, because Daenerys was listening with great interest. The Unsullied are trained in the way of the ancient Ghis Empire Legion. They are castrated at a very young age. The entire training lasts for 10 years. During this period, they will master the use of 3 types of spears. The little translator continued to talk. Ian suddenly asked a question. Which 3? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 203 The True Unsullied. In the TV series, the Unsullied only used one type of spear from beginning to end, and there was no more detailed description in the original book. So when Ian heard the word 3 types again, he was immediately interested. Tell that barbarian that he should be ashamed of his ignorance and arrogance. Krasny Nakros didn't speak the common language, but when he saw Ian finally started asking questions, he seemed to have regained his position, and said loudly to the little translator. He asked some professional questions. Master. The little translator didn't answer Ian, but looked at Krasny. Then go and call Instructor Fema. Krasny looked at the little translator first, but suddenly remembered that he still needed the little translator to stay on the scene, to maintain communication for them, so he turned to a slave girl who was fanning him behind him. Hurry up, stupid pig. The girl hurried down the platform and went to the square. After a while, Instructor Fema mentioned by Krasny came to the platform. He was a typical GI's man, and his hairstyle was even more exaggerated than that of the slave owner Krasny. He is both the instructor of the Unsullied of Astapor and Krasny's assistant when selling the Unsullied. Usually, when Krasny sells the Unsullied, he only needs to bring a little translator and let her say the set phrases that he has memorized in advance. Most buyers of the Unsullied know nothing about military affairs. They will be stunned by the little translator's narration, and then pay the money and place the order. But when they meet experts who want to know more details, they need to ask this instructor to answer them. Dear guests, do you have any questions that I need to answer? Fermor spoke the common language. Although it was far less fluent than the little translator, it was enough for people to understand. I hope you can give a detailed introduction to the 3 types of spears used by the Unsullied and the formation method they train. Ian added his request. The Unsullied have been trained to use 3 types of spears since childhood, namely the 1.2 meter throwing spear, the 2.5 meter one-handed fighting spear and the 6 meter phalanx spear. When using different spears, they will also use different formations and equip different shields. Although we only provide small round shields, you can replace their equipment at your own expense. When they use one-handed fighting spears, they can also skillfully use large oval shields or tower shields. In combat, you can let some of the Unsullied use throwing spears to form a skirmish line outside your army formation. They can use dense javelins to block the impact of enemy chariots and cavalry on the phalanx. When they use super long spears, they can build the strongest defense line in the world. They will fight to the death, unless they are directly penetrated by enemy cavalry, because the depth of their formation is too shallow. Otherwise they are a wall, and no one can break through their defense line before the last Unsullied falls. When they use fighting spears, they will be the most powerful attackers. They have the most exquisite fighting skills and the fastest attack speed. They can even keep up with the impact of heavy cavalry on the battlefield. Instructor Fermor introduced Alexander's Guards Infantry. Ian inexplicably thought of this. In the decisive Battle of Gorgamela, Alexander's Guards Infantry kept up with the attack speed of the companion cavalry in the last wave of impact. After the companion cavalry tore open Darius's central army phalanx, they almost seamlessly poured into the gap of the Persian army formation, laying the foundation for victory in one fell swoop. And from the 3 weapons used by the Unsullied, their functions are really similar to those of Alexander's Guards Infantry. They are far more powerful than Alexander's Guards. They have longer training and are not afraid of pain at all. They do not fight for money or honor. They are pure killing machines. You don't believe it? Instructor Fermor took Ian's silence as doubt. I wonder if you have ever heard the story of the 3,000 warriors of Koha. If not, I don't think I would have come all the way to Astapa. Ian nodded and did not deny it. The Battle of the 3,000 Warriors to defend Koha took place more than 400 years before the War of the Usurper. Khal Timo led his Khals from the east across the Dothraki Sea and marched all the way to the city of Koha. The people of Koha hired two mercenary groups, the Bright Banner and the Second Sons, and then bought 3,000 Unsullied. When the Unsullied arrived, the army of Koha had been shattered, and the two mercenary groups had already fled. It was under such circumstances that 3,000 Unsullied arrived the day before the fall of Koha and defeated Khal Timo's 20,000 howling warriors head-on, forcing the remaining Dothraki to cut off their braids in front of the battle with a casualty ratio of 2,400 to 12,000, and then lost in disgrace. But I think Ian changed the subject. The rumors I heard were versions that you have revised time and again. What do you mean? Instructor Fermor was a little surprised. Normally, even the most picky customers would place an order after listening to his detailed introduction. So, this Andal man was going off topic? How far is Astapa from Koha? Ian continued to ask. About 3,000 kilometers. Fermor answered truthfully. Koha bought the Unsullied when the news from the front was unfavorable, and then this slave army rushed to Koha after a long journey. At that time, Motkeo had almost wiped out Koha's original defenders and let go of the two mercenary groups that were supposed to defend Koha, the Bright Banner and the Second Sons. So before the battle of 3,000 warriors to defend Koha, which you are so proud of, Motkeo's KLS had been fighting with Koha's army for several months, and even if the Unsullied failed to arrive at the city on time, Koha would not be broken the next day. Do you want to say that there is such a coincidence in the world? An army arrived at the city the day before Koha was broken after a march of 3,000 kilometers? Instructor Femmer, I believe that with your professionalism, you will judge that this is a story added later. Femmer was silent. He didn't want to admit it, but he couldn't refute it. There are too many variables in a 3,000 kilometer march, and it is ridiculous to be able to time it so accurately. That is to say, it was not only your Unsullied who fought on behalf of Koha during the Battle of Koha, Ian continued. Even if there were still some remnants of Koha, they are not worth mentioning. Fermor hurriedly defended. The Unsullied won the Battle of Koha. This is an indisputable fact. Based on this, Ian ignored Fermor's defense. We can continue to infer the impact of this stage of the war before the arrival of the Unsullied on the Dothraki. According to my understanding, we already know some information. First, the craftsmanship of Koha is world renowned, and they have the best heavy cavalry in all of Essos. Second, the Dothraki have no craftsmen. They do not have their own bow making technology, and most of their bows and arrows are captured or collected as tribute from city-states, so the number of their arrows is also extremely limited. There was a shot in the TV series where the Dothraki held 3 different bows. In addition, the original book also mentioned that Khal Drogo specially sent little girls to collect feather arrows from the dead after the battle, and Daenerys despised Khal Drogo's behavior of wasting arrows. These details all illustrate the Dothraki people's lack of arrows. Chapter 204, Perfect Marketing Advertisement, First Extra Update in March. From these two sets of information, we can conclude that, Ian continued, Motkeo's army had almost no arrows to use when facing the Unsullied. Why? Anyone who has used a bow and arrow knows that it is easy to damage the arrowhead by shooting at iron plates, let alone shooting at the magic mixed metal of the Koha people. The Dothraki, who already had insufficient arrows, damaged a large number of arrows in the process of fighting against the Koha heavy cavalry. This is a key factor, that they can only rely on charging to solve the battle when facing the Unsullied. Even if the Dothraki only rely on charging, the Unsullied can defeat 20,000 Dothraki with only 3,000 people, which is an unprecedented victory. Instructor Fermor said loudly. Ian could feel that he had become anxious. It is a victory, but it was not accomplished by the Unsullied alone, let alone a field battle. We have already come to the conclusion together before, that the Battle of Koha did not take place the day before the city was broken, and Koha still had defenders. Who the hell has come to the conclusion with you? Instructor Fermor roared in his heart. So when the Unsullied arrived at Koha, they did not rush to meet the enemy, but had time to prepare. They lined up with their backs to the city and built a defensive position. to solve the two most difficult problems when facing a cavalry charge: the kinetic energy generated by the cavalry charge and the impact of the cavalry outflanking on the infantry formation. Kinetic energy? What is that? Fermor suddenly interrupted Ian and looked at the little translator Missandei beside him, thinking that it was just a common language word he had never heard of. But the little black girl also shook her head helplessly to him, indicating that she had never heard of it either. It's the power generated by the cavalry charge. Ian was too lazy to explain, so he directly changed to a word that the other party could understand. The first is the impact force. Even if it is light cavalry, the weight of the horses and the men is nearly half a ton. A few spears alone cannot absorb the force generated by their charge. In this case, even if the Unsullied stabbed the Dothraki warriors who were charging towards them, the bodies of the enemies would smash into the Unsullied phalanx, killing and injuring some lucky ones, and causing the phalanx to become disorderly, making it impossible for the Unsullied to effectively defend against the rear cavalry that rushed into the phalanx from these gaps. Even if the Unsullied relied on absolute courage and discipline to not retreat a single step, 2,400 Unsullied would not be able to replace 12,000 Dothraki cavalry in this charge. Therefore, they must have arranged chevaux de frise, or dug trenches in front of the formation to absorb the force generated by the cavalry charge and greatly reduce the opponent's final impact speed. The second is outflanking. There is a detail in your description of this battle that says the Dothraki charged a total of 18 times. What does this mean? People who understand military affairs know that no army can be broken up several times and then regrouped. Therefore, the Dothraki attacked in batches like a round-robin battle. This means that the Unsullied, who were lined up with their backs to the city, built sufficient fortifications on the flanks, forcing the Dothraki to give up the idea of outflanking, and could only launch an attack with a horizontal width equal to that of the Unsullied army. In this way, the maximum number of troops that could be deployed at a time was only 1 or 2,000, and their numerical advantage was greatly offset. At the same time, there may be many longbowmen on the walls of Koha behind the Unsullied to provide fire support for the Unsullied and use rain of arrows to consume the Dothraki's troops. Therefore, when all the subjective and objective factors such as the Dothraki had almost no arrows left and could not annihilate the Unsullied at a distance, the Unsullied were lined up with their backs to the city, and the Dothraki could not outflank them. The Unsullied prepared chevaux de frise, which reduced the speed of the cavalry's charge, and there were archers on the walls of Koha to provide support were ignored by you. This battle was made into a legend, a military myth. And the slave traders crowned all the glory of the Battle of Koha on the Unsullied, in order to greatly increase the value of the Unsullied. Am I right? If it was before Ian officially understood these Unsullied, he would not have made this judgment today, because for the Unsullied in the TV series, even if they had so many favorable conditions, they might not be able to defeat a full 20,000 Dothraki roaring warriors. But when Ian saw this enhanced version of the Alexander Guard's infantry, he finally figured out why the Battle of Koha was victorious. Of course, the most important factor for the Unsullied to win was that the Dothraki were stupid. Don't invite the flag of justice. Don't attack the formation of dignified people. Everyone knows that cavalry will not get good results by attacking the phalanx of spears head on. But there are very few examples of fighting against cavalry with spearmen as the main force in the entire history of war. Most of the battles where infantry defeated cavalry relied on bows and crossbows. Why? Even the most brain-congested cavalry commander knows that the thing cannot be charged head-on. Unfortunately, the Dothraki are not among them. After listening to Ian's words, Instructor Fermor's face turned pale. As a trainer of the Unsullied, he naturally knows the combat effectiveness of the Unsullied best. Because of this, he has always felt strange about the result of the Battle of Koha. He once used the sand table to deduce the Battle of Koha 100 times. Although he used all his life's knowledge to command the Battle of the Unsullied, the result of 100 times was still failure. Ian's words finally solved his doubts for many years. It turned out that the good masters of Astapa kept modifying the original version of the story in order to raise the price of the Unsullied, so that today, 400 years later, they have successfully deceived themselves. Therefore, although Fermor looked at Ian with a wary look, he could not help but show respect. The great philanthropist Krasnus also looked unhappy. The little translator had just translated Ian's words to him word for word. Although he did not understand anything at the beginning, he did understand Ian's last words about raising the price, and he knew it was true. For hundreds of years, although the prices of goods in the entire Slavers Bay have not changed much, the price of the Unsullied has been rising. 1 silver coin can buy 4 to 6 healthy boys, and an Unsullied can be sold for a high price of 12 to 20 gold dragons today, completely relying on on-site bargaining. Now that Ian suddenly pointed this out, Krasny had to wonder if this guy was here to make trouble. Ask this damn Westeros barbarian whether he wants to buy it or not. Krasny felt that he had lost his patience. However, before the little translator spoke, Ian spoke again. Okay, continue to introduce the Unsullied. The little translator had to stop for the time being and translated Ian's words to Krasny, then introduced them to him. Krasny suppressed his dissatisfaction. His servants had previously verified that Ian had several boxes of gold. If the deal could be completed today, he would make the largest deal in the history of Vastapur, which was worth his patience. So he poked the little translator with the top of the whip. Tell that Westeros barbarian that these guys have been standing there for a day and a night. As long as I don't order them to disband, they will stand until they die. Even if 999 Unsullied fall to the brick floor and die, the last one will still stand motionless until death comes. They are absolutely fearless and absolutely obedient. Tell him this. So the little translator once again took over the task of introduction and translated the slave trader's words to Ian. Then she continued, the Unsullied you see are elites who have passed countless tests to obtain the spiked helmet. On average, it takes 20 castrated boys to grow up to be an Unsullied. Those who can't run all day with a full load have already been killed during the training. In addition, there are those who can't climb the mountain in the dark night, can't walk through a burning coal, or can't kill babies. Kill babies? Daenerys interrupted the little translator. She felt herself trembling. After grabbing Ian's sleeve with one hand, she barely felt better. Where do they kill babies? Before winning the spiked helmet, the Unsullied must take a silver coin to the slave market, find a crying newborn, and kill it in front of its mother. In this way, we can make sure that there is no weakness in his heart. The little translator hurriedly explained. Daenerys felt dizzy. The hand that was holding Ian's sleeve slid down, and she simply held Ian's hand tightly to gain strength. They snatched the baby from its mother's arms, killed it as she watched, and then paid a silver coin to compensate her for her pain. It's compensation to the slave's owner. The Unsullied are not allowed to steal. Instructor Fermor spoke again. You are too kind. You can't take back a country this way. He looked at Ian, as if hoping that this true general would convince his queen. In fact, I can also tell you that the number of Unsullied who fail the test of killing babies is far less than those who fail the test of dogs. Fermor continued, on the day each boy is castrated, we give him a puppy, which he must raise until the end of the first year, and then strangle it with his own hands. Those who can't do it will be executed immediately, and their flesh and blood will be fed to the surviving dogs. We found that this is the most important lesson for them. Enough. Daenerys interrupted Fermor, then pulled Ian, and pulled him to the other side of the platform. We won't buy them, okay? We are not only buying these Unsullied, but also the babies and dogs they killed. Daenerys said in a pleading tone after making sure that the slave traders couldn't hear her. Without the experience of being a Khaleesi and being betrayed later, Daenerys at this moment is far less strong than when she arrived in Astapor in the original book. At this moment, the first thing she thought of was not to save these slaves, but to quickly escape from this dirty place. But when she saw Ian's expression without any change, she realized. You already knew all this? Daenerys exclaimed. Chapter 205 No one understands dragons better than me. I wonder what you mean, Your Majesty. Here, Daenerys looked down at Pride Square. Everything. Lord Graveson told me in detail. He once sailed here. This was Ian's general explanation. Anything related to what he saw and heard from afar was told to him by Darren. That's why I chose to come here to find the army. He also told you about the Good Lord. Daenerys frowned, and when she said the word Good Lord, she felt as if she had eaten a fly and felt sick. Atrocities against slaves. Daenerys had been in exile with Viserys for many years and had long been accustomed to slavery, but almost all she had seen were slaves in the houses. She had seen them being abused, but had never heard of such cruelty as the good Lord of Astapor. No, he only told me that the Unsullied are the best army in the world, and I have just confirmed this myself. So you still plan to buy them? After learning all this? Yes, because it is difficult for us to find an alternative plan. Or to say. Ian looked into Daenerys' eyes. His tone was very serious. Your Majesty, do you have any other opinions? They are not human at all. Daenerys shouted in her heart. They are eunuchs made of bricks, as bad as the rest of Astapor, killing babies and strangling puppies for a spiked helmet. But Daenerys didn't say it out loud. She knew she couldn't conflict with Lord Derry here, in front of outsiders. But why? Obviously I'm his queen, and I should make the decision. Daenerys became more and more depressed. She didn't know who she was angry with. Was it Ian who suddenly became strange and cold-blooded? Or was it herself who was cowardly and didn't dare to speak out the order? Or was it this slave city itself with only stagnant heat, sweat and peeling bricks? Daenerys' silence satisfied Ian, which meant that he had successfully established his authority over her through his identity as a teacher in the past 2 months. Even though she was the queen, she did not dare to oppose his opinion in public. Therefore, Ian decided to end this test. I will buy them, Your Majesty, and I will tell you my reasons after we return to the ship. Ian changed back to his usual gentle tone, and you just need to trust me as before. Daenerys hesitated for a moment, and finally said a good word. Then next, I need you to cooperate with me. Ian whispered beside Daenerys. Then, the two returned to Kraznys and the others. Ask this barbarian, Kraznys hurriedly said to the little translator. Ask his bitch queen what the final decision is. Lord Kraznys wants to know whether you have decided to buy the Unsullied. I don't like the way you train the Unsullied, and I don't like these brick eunuchs. Daenerys answered. The queen said she didn't like the Unsullied and their training methods, but she didn't refuse directly. She probably wanted to bargain. The little translator immediately said to Kraznys. But Lord Dragoncaller convinced me. Daenerys changed the subject. He is professional in military affairs, and he is also the highest commander of my army. I value his opinion, so our final decision is to buy. She changed her mind again. She said she was willing to buy. The little translator said quickly. Did she bargain? But no, she said she changed her mind because of Lord Dragoncaller's advice. Dragoncaller? Who is that? Kraznys looked around Daenerys blankly, hoping to find such a person. It's the Earl next to the Queen. The knight reported their name at the beginning. Dragoncaller. Kraznys looked Ian up and down. What does this mean? I don't know, Master. I just translated the common language they said. Of course you don't know, you stupid ass. I asked you to ask them. Kraznys whipped the little translator. Yes, Master. The little translator nodded quickly and then turned to Ian. Your Excellency the Dragoncaller, my master is very interested in your title, and he wants to know the origin of your title. The origin is because I don't want Daenerys to think that the birth of the dragon is her own credit, so I also gave myself a title. But this time Ian deliberately let Daenerys say this title. He just wanted to attract Kraznys' attention. I'm here to buy the Unsullied, not to sell dragons. Ian pretended to be impatient. You can't afford my dragons. I don't want to waste time on things that have nothing to do with it. Just as Ian was speaking, the black dragon iron flew up from the platform and landed on Ian's shoulder. How is it? What did he say? Kraznys asked quickly. The Andals don't want to talk about this issue. He just wants to buy the Unsullied as soon as possible. But he also said that we can't afford his dragons. What do you mean? Are you going to sell his dragons? Kraznys' eyes suddenly lit up. Lord Kraznys wants to know, are you selling your dragons? As long as someone offers a starting price, why can't I sell it? Ian looked at Kraznys as if he was looking at a fool. Although the latter didn't understand the common language, he could still sense some contempt. But dragons are extinct. The dragon on your shoulder is the only one in the world. How can you be willing to sell it? The little translator asked again, after communicating with Kraznys. That's why I said that someone must offer a starting price. It takes at least several decades for a dragon to grow up, and I now need an army that can sweep across Westeros. If someone can provide me with these, not only the dragon itself, but also the method of taming the dragon can be sold to him, so that he can become the true master of the dragon. It's no secret that you need Valyrian blood to tame a dragon. Apart from that, you can only use the dragon horn. The little black girl continued to translate Krasner's words. Did you get the legendary treasure? Of course I'm not talking about the dragon horn. I don't need that kind of thing at all. I have my own way to tame dragons. Ian shook his head. Ridiculous. Do you take me as a fool? Or do you think I'm an uneducated barbarian? Krasnius was furious after hearing the translation. I thought you were a wise man, but you are acting like a fool now. The translator was stunned for a moment and considered his words. He said he thought you were a wise man, but now you are not thinking with your wisdom. What does that mean? Ask him carefully. What does he mean? Master, why do you say that? Isn't it? Ian raised his hand gently, and the black dragon iron left his shoulder and crawled at his feet. Let your master open his eyes and see. Do I look like I have Valyrian blood, or hold that damn horn? I have none of them, but the dragon surrenders to me. This is ridiculous. Sometimes reality is more ridiculous than poetry and anecdotes. Dragons have been extinct for 200 years, and I'm the first person to truly own a dragon in these 200 years. Whether it is the Maesters of Westeros, the Wizards of Cuff, or the Witches of Asshai, no one knows dragons better than me. No matter how much they talk, they have never even seen the shadow of a dragon. Practice is the only criterion for testing truth. This, Krasnius was unable to refute for a while. Chapter 206. Let's work. Astapa. You have seen the truth with your own eyes, but you insist on believing in the book that was passed down 300 years or 1,000 years ago. I thought that the GIs, people who established the greatest civilization in the world, would know how to pursue the truth better. Ian shook his head, as if he had finally lost his patience. Okay, let's stop talking about this. I said you can't afford my dragon. I can trade all the Unsullied with you. Krasnius said loudly immediately, after listening to the translation. The Unsullied of Astapa did not belong to him alone, but to 8 good masters, but he knew that no one else would object to this deal. Ian's conditions were too tempting. Owning a pet dragon tied with a chain, and owning a tamed dragon are two completely different concepts. The former just gave them an extra collection of curiosity, while the latter meant that Astapa had a dragon king. This would revive the Ghis Empire. Krasny knew that what Ian said was contrary to the books he had read and the rumors he had heard, but so what? That Andal was right. The Gith, who built the greatest civilization in the world, knew how to pursue the truth. Practice is the only criterion for testing the truth. Graston closed his eyes and imagined the black dragon iron resting on his shoulder. At this moment, he seemed to no longer be the slave owner of Astapa, but had crossed 1,000 years and became a great Valyrian dragon king. How many Unsullied are there in Astapa? Iron's question broke Krasny's fantasy. If it's in thousands, it's 8,000. In addition, there are 600. If you wait for a month, you can get 9,000. If you are willing to wait for a year, we can give you another 2,000. Krasnius thought for a while and said, then are 8,000, 9,000 or 12,000 Unsullied enough to sweep across Westeros? Iron asked back. Krasnius' face darkened. Even a man as arrogant as him couldn't say such nonsense, so he could only look at Instructor Fermor for help. Boasting about the Unsullied is Fermor's strong point. But facing Krasni's request for help, Instructor Fermor's face darkened. If he was facing some half-baked people, he might be able to use his professionalism to fool them, but facing Ian, who had just exposed the Koha 3000 Warriors marketing scam, Instructor Fermor didn't know how to start. If their commander was you, maybe it would be possible. In the end, Fermor just said a compliment. If I could win by talking, I wouldn't even need a single Unsullied, Ian said with a scornful smile. You and I both know the answer. No, this amount of troops is far from enough. Even if you pack all the eunuchs and the entire Astapa together for me, it's still not enough to buy my dragon. On the contrary, I have enough money to buy all the brick eunuchs here. Ian continued, so, just make an offer, Lord Krasnius. How many gold dragons do you need to buy the 8,600 eunuchs here? No, Krasnius looked at the black dragon at Ian's feet and couldn't take his eyes off it. He was unwilling to trade these Unsullied with gold, because if he did, he would lose the chance to get a dragon forever. Why is he looking at Ian like that? Is he trying to rob them? Raul saw that it was time to play a double act, so he stepped forward and blocked Ian behind him. After the little translator told Krasnez what he said, the latter was about to get angry, but unexpectedly, Ian had already started to scold Raul. What nonsense are you talking about? Ian yelled at Raul. Will the wise Jith go back on their words? Will ancient Astapa destroy its reputation? If I had any doubts like this, I would not have come to Astapa with dragons and gold. Credibility is like a mirror. The mirror of Astapa has been clear and bright for thousands of years. How could they allow it to have a crack? What did he say? Krasnez asked the little translator, who immediately repeated Ian's words in Valyrian. Are you sure you didn't make it up? Krasnez looked at the little translator suspiciously. I can't make it up, master. The little translator lowered his head. What he said is like poetry. You really can't make it up. Krasnez nodded, and when he looked at Ian again, he no longer had the feeling of looking at a barbarian before. Being able to understand the greatness of the Jith people so well, even if this person is a barbarian, he is the most civilized barbarian. Originally, due to the way Astaporians always think, he had never thought of the option of robbing, and after listening to Ian's words, he had even less thought about it. Ian was right. Astapa's existence depends on its pure and flawless reputation. If he robbed the people who came to Astapa to buy the Unsullied, the foundation of the city's survival would be destroyed. Even if he could really become the Dragon King, such a price would be unacceptable. Moreover, the act of robbery would undoubtedly anger the Dragon Caller. If he refused to teach him how to tame dragons, then he would lose both ends, and the other good masters of Astapa would never let him go. So is there no hope? Krasnez looked at the black dragon beside Ian, and his mood sank to the valley. But 8,600 Unsullied are still far from enough for us. Where should we go to find new troops next? Seeing Ian's gesture, Daenerys said what Ian had just taught her. Yeah, where can we find an army? Ian's face was suddenly filled with worry. It would be great if we could get more warriors like this. Ian pointed at the Unsullied on Pride Square. Even if the quality is only half of this. No, even if the quality is only 1/5 of this. Use 10,000 Unsullied as the main force, and add 20,000 legions of lower quality, and finally hire a few mercenary regiments to get cavalry. We will have a powerful army that can directly land in Westeros. Unfortunately, we can't find a low-end version of the Unsullied Legion. Ian shook his head regretfully, and just buying these Unsullied will take up most of our funds, and we won't have money to recruit mercenary regiments later. Through his peripheral vision, Ian saw the little black girl quickly translating her conversation with Daenerys to Krasnez, and the slave trader became visibly excited. I have a proposal, Your Excellency. Krasnez hurried to Ian, even using honorifics involuntarily. If you are willing to stay in Astapa for 2 years, then we can provide you with a total of 14,000 Unsullied and 20,000 Jith Legion soldiers. The latter will also be trained in the Jith Legion. Although the quality is far inferior to the Unsullied themselves, it is definitely enough to meet the requirements you just mentioned. The price is my dragon and the method of dragon taming. Ian listened to the translation and pretended to understand what the other party meant. If you use dragons to pay the fees, then the money you save will be enough to hire the lower spawn, storm crows, longlance and golden core for a whole year at the same time, and hire a fleet to take you across the sea. Krasnez said with great consideration for Ian. Can you ensure the quality of those Jith Legion soldiers? Ian was moved. Guaranteed by the reputation of Astapa. Krasnez said, patting his chest. Chapter 207. Too many kind lords. I have some other requests. If you agree, I can accept this deal. Ian continued. You propose. I want the 8,600 Unsullied in stock now. In the next 2 years, I will borrow the military camp of Astapa to station my Unsullied. Their food and fodder will be provided by Astapa. Of course, I will pay for the food and fodder. This is against the rules. Krasnez hesitated. The rules are not important. If you keep the Unsullied and sell them to me 2 years later, you will still be responsible for their food and lodging for the past 2 years, right? According to my plan, you can at least save money for food. Krasnez was stunned. After thinking about it carefully, it seemed to be the case. But, why are you in a hurry to get these unsullied now? If you plan to station them in Astapor, wouldn't it be more convenient to get the goods together in 2 years? I don't plan to wait here for 2 years in vain. Ian shook his head. During this time, I will go to the Lazarin area in the north to train troops from time to time and bring back slaves from there. What are you going to do with slaves? This involves my second requirement. I want to build shipyards and other factories on the east bank of the Worm River. I need to recruit migrant workers from the villages on the riverbank and the right to cut down trees in the mountains in the south. Ian held up 2 fingers. I want to build my own fleet. Of course, they have to dock at the port of Astapor. Yesterday, after the fleet arrived in Astapor, Ian used a falcon to scout the city of Astapor and its surrounding terrain and population distribution. Astapor is located at the estuary on the west bank of the Worm River. It faces the sea to the north, a small plain across the Worm River to the east, and the primitive Ghis Mountains to the southwest. The population in the city is about 60,000 to 80,000, and it is said that 2/3 of them are slaves. To the east of the city, there are some villages on both sides of the Worm River. Ian initially estimated that the total population there should be about 80,000 to 120,000, of which more than half are serfs. The cultivated land and population outside the city are not enough to feed the entire city of Astapor, so the city's food supply is very dependent on imports. To the north of Astapor is the port, and there is no city wall on that side. If a fleet attacks the city from the sea, it is basically in an undefended state, and its other 3 sides are equally vulnerable, with short and thin walls, and no defensive facilities at all. Perhaps, as the famous Spartan saying goes, warriors are the strongest defense of a city. With their unsullied, the people of Astapor never took the city defense to heart. Of course, another reason why they didn't take the city defense to heart was probably that the city of Astapor itself lacked value and was not attractive to any potential invaders. Yes, this is why Ian said that the city of Astapor was worthless. The city lacked resources, population, and defense, and it was easy for people to use food to strangle it. Although the mountains to its south were undeveloped and had great economic potential, the potential could not be converted into value in the absence of land reclamation, population, and time. Considering that taking the unsullied and seizing Astapor would cause a great loss of his own credibility and arouse the vigilance of the other 2 cities in Slavers Bay, Ian finally gave up the idea of seizing Astapor as his first core base. In Slavers Bay, the only city that qualified to be Ian's control core was Meereen. Therefore, before trying to take Meereen, obtaining the right to station troops in Astapor and the right to develop valuable land near Astapor became the best choice. This way, they would not have to bear the stigma of betrayal, nor worry about causing hostility between Yunkai and Meereen, and they could also use Astapor's mature unsullied training system to work for themselves for free. This involves industries that have nothing to do with us. I can't make decisions for those good masters. Krasny shook his head directly this time. If the stationing of the delivered unsullied in Astapor was still something he could decide, Ian's request to open a shipyard and other factories was not something he could convince other good masters of. I insist on my request, Ian said firmly. If you can't convince other good masters, then I can only choose to buy these unsullied with gold and leave Astapor. This. Krasny hesitated, looked at Ian's dragon again, and finally gritted his teeth and said, okay, I will try to convince them. I'll wait for your news. After returning to the Kiss of the Breeze goddess, Celia first sent Daenerys back to her room, and then came out to find Ian. Just now, she went to Pride Square dressed as Daenerys' maid, and didn't say a word the whole time. Can the deal be reached? Celia asked. No. Ian answered firmly. Why? With dragons and dragon taming skills combined, can the good masters of Astapor resist this temptation? I think even if your request will harm the interests of some good masters, they will not give up this opportunity to get dragons. Of course they can't resist this temptation, but the question is, who will be the Dragon King? Ian shrugged. Isn't it? Celia was stunned when she said this. Krasny Nakros was the most powerful lord in Astapor, but this didn't mean that other lords were willing to sacrifice their own interests to give him a chance to become a Dragon King. It was even possible that other lords would interfere. So what you did today was to sow discord between Krasnys Monacros and the other good masters? Celia immediately understood Ian's intention. When you put the dragon in front of him, and he had to miss it, because of the interference of other good masters, his emotions towards those colleagues would turn into resentment. 8 good masters are too many for Astapa, Ian said without telling Celia in detail about the next plan. Instead, he asked, how is Daenerys feeling? Very low, very low. Celia paused. To be honest, I don't understand why you had to let her go with you today. I clearly said that I could help you convince her to stay on the ship. Besides, Celia continued, even if we took her with us, you could have prevented those slave traders from telling us about the killing of babies and puppies. We already knew this information, and you didn't need to let them say it again. Then why do you think I did this? Ian asked back with a smile. Are you provoking her? Look, as long as you are willing to use your brain, you can always find the answer. Chapter 208 Conditions Not Ripe. Such stimulation will make Daenerys disgusted with slavery. Even if she doesn't think of abolishing slavery immediately, it won't be long before you want to abolish slavery too. Celia frowned, but then shook her head. It's impossible. Abolition is equivalent to declaring war on Yunque, Meereen, Volantis, New Ghis, Karth and the entire Jade Sea at the same time. You can't do such a stupid thing. Then what do I want to do? Celia thought for a long time, and finally shook her head. Don't think about it. If you can't think of it, Ian waved his hand. Go to work, including tonight's banquet for the Unsullied instructors, and the purchase of centaurs from the entire slave bay. You are responsible for your heavy tasks. You said you would give me a satisfactory explanation. Daenerys sat upright in the chair, trying her best to show the majesty of the queen. Have you cried? Ian did not rush to explain, but stepped forward and reached out to wipe away the tears from the corners of Daenerys' eyes. I didn't. Daenerys was instantly defeated. She wanted to slap Ian's hand away, but she didn't slap it when she stretched out her hand. Finally, she simply bit Ian's hand to vent her dissatisfaction. Ian didn't feel much, and he didn't know whether it was because he was thick-skinned or the girl didn't use enough force. I said I would give you an explanation. Ian took his hand back without encountering any resistance. Basically, the other party opened his mouth as soon as he made a move. I feel sad about the plight of the slaves just like you, Ian said sadly. When I just heard about the atrocities of the slave owners, I wanted to cut them into pieces. Then why did you buy those brick eunuchs? Daenerys became even more puzzled. Because I want to give them freedom. Ian's tone became firm. Daenerys opened her mouth instantly. That's it. Yes. Give them freedom. The answer to the question that I have been thinking about since I was in Pride Square just now. Whether I can do something for the slaves. Give them freedom. How noble. I really shouldn't have doubted Ian. Will you release them after you buy them? Daenerys asked. No, if I release them, Astapa will still castrate countless boys every year, and this deep-rooted evil will continue to spread endlessly. You want to use them to occupy Astapa and completely eliminate the system of the Unsullied? No, if I occupy Astapa, then the slaves in Yunque, Meereen, New Ghis, Volantis, Karth and the entire Jade Sea coast will still suffer. You want to abolish slavery? Yes. That's what I want to do. We have the same ideal. Daenerys cheered in her heart. Complete abolition. Ian nodded. But the time is not yet ripe, and we are not strong enough. Liberating slaves is to make enemies with half the world. Before we accumulate enough power to shake the world, we cannot let anyone discover our intentions. We can't even release some slaves first, otherwise we will become public enemies here and be besieged. You mean, we can't do anything now? Daenerys understood what Ian meant. We can't even liberate some people first. We are accumulating strength now. Ian shook his head and argued, for this we must be feigned with the slaves, and even cater to the slaves on the surface, so that they can relax their vigilance, and then we have a chance to win. But every second we wait, the slaves are suffering. Daenerys always felt that something was wrong with what Ian said. The slaves have suffered for thousands of years, and after we free them, there will be no more slavery and oppression. They, their descendants, and their descendants' descendants will all live as free people forever. But if we fail, There will never be another person to break their shackles. Not in the past thousands of years, and not in the next thousands of years. If we fail, because of our eagerness for quick success, they will be slaves forever. This Daenerys was shocked. She had never thought about these long-term issues. So, are you willing to cooperate with me? Bury slavery in the ground and let it become the dust of history? Let everyone be free, and not oppressed. Ian stretched out a hand in front of Daenerys. Yes, I believe you, Ian. Daenerys nodded heavily, and then put her hand on it. Until then, we must endure. Yes. Daenerys nodded again. Done. Ian whispered in his heart. Give Daenerys a strong stimulus, and then take the lead in proposing the abolition of slavery. This is Ian's plan to stabilize Daenerys. The same thing, if Ian proposes it first or Daenerys proposes it first, the effect is completely different. If Daenerys finally proposes to abolish slavery after a while, because she can't stand the suffering of the slaves, when Ian tells her that the conditions are not ripe now, and we need to be patient, then no matter how much Ian says, Daenerys will feel that Ian is shirking responsibility. This will plant a thorn in the relationship between the two. Although Daenerys' value has been relatively weakened after Ian became a dragon spirit, and Daenerys has almost no real power to cause trouble to Ian. But if Ian can solve this problem by just bluffing, why not do it? After all, the future dragons will depend on her to hatch, and he may not be able to shift into a second dragon. As the dragon grows, the burden of the shifting dragon on mental power will become greater and greater. Taking the initiative to propose abolition before Daenerys thinks of it will make Daenerys think that abolition is also Ian's ideal. At this time, Ian tells her in advance that the conditions are not ripe now, so he will not be suspected of shirking responsibility. Ian said that the conditions are not ripe, and Daenerys will think that the conditions are really not ripe. As for when the conditions for abolition will be ripe in the end, who knows? Maybe it will never be ripe. Anyway, if it is not necessary, Ian does not have the option of abolishing slavery in his plan. It is not known whether there are players waiting for Ian to abolish slavery in secret, so as to warn those slave cities. Therefore, Ian will not only not abolish slavery now, but also strengthen slavery, so that any slave owner who hears the news that Ian wants to abolish slavery will first react to knock open the informer's head to see if there is water in it. Of course, even if the influence of the player is excluded, and Ian is allowed to go to the world of ice and fire alone, he will not make the decision to abolish slavery. After the slaves of this era gained their so-called freedom, they actually had no idea how to live. If a person was really kind-hearted, it would be better to reduce their working hours and let them have enough food. In the original novel, the liberated slaves lost their original jobs, and they followed Dana's army like locusts, at a loss. Reasonable working hours, sufficient food and lower penalties are the normal solutions for a kind time traveler. The liberation of slaves without foundation is purely self-indulgent like the white left. Chapter 209, Krasny's Conspiracy. After the short meeting of the Good Masters, the unsullied instructor Thermor stepped into the rooftop garden of the Pyramid of the Great Good Master Krasny's Mo Nakros. What do the other Good Masters say? He asked. They are a bunch of fools. Krasnys did not answer directly, but his anxious expression and irritable tone had already given the answer. A bunch of short-sighted things. Krasnys cursed again, and even though two slave girls were fanning him from behind, he was still sweating. They are against this deal? Yes, 3 of the 7 people are clearly against it, and 2 of the remaining people said they need to consider it. The only ones who support the deal are my old friend Graston Curvis and another guy who wants to be the Dragon King. Half of the unsullied business in the city belongs to me, and he said he wants to be the Dragon King? It's ridiculous. Krasnys was full of resentment. Don't they see how important dragons are to Astapa? We will revive the Ghis Empire. How can they not unite around me at this time? Reviving the Ghis Empire is of course good, but if the Emperor is not himself, it is better to keep the status quo. Instructor Fema can basically guess the thoughts of other Good Masters. Krasnys is stupid, arrogant, and irritable. Other Good Masters don't like him, let alone allow him to ride on their heads. If it weren't for him being the head of the Nakros family, Fema Nakros himself wouldn't want to pay attention to him. Sir, Fema did not answer Krasnys' question, but turned the topic back to the main purpose of his visit. Ian Derry rented a layer of the pyramid from the Temple of Holy Grace. He held a banquet tonight and invited 22 senior Unsullied instructors including me. It is said that the banquet is of high standard. Why did he invite you? Sir, have you forgotten? If we reach an agreement with Ian yesterday, we will train for him alone in the next 2 years. What's strange about him coming to please us in advance? Furmore explained patiently. The deal is done. You also know the attitudes of others. Does this look like a deal can be reached? Krasnys became more and more irritated. We know about this, but Ian doesn't. He must have confidence in you. After all, you promised him. But the others are very firm. I don't think I can convince them. Maybe we don't need to convince them. Instructor Furmore lowered his voice. We just need to make sure they don't object. What nonsense are you talking about? If the other party was not also a noble, and his nephew, Krasnys really wanted to whip him, how could he make them not object without convincing them? Lord Krasnys, think about it. As long as we complete this deal, when you have the dragons, plus our Unsullied, within 10 years, we will be able to conquer Yunque, Meereen, and New Ghis, and rebuild the city of Ghis. By then, you will be the Emperor of Ghis, and what qualifications do those good lords have to point fingers at your decisions? The power of the Emperor is unquestionable. I admit that what you said makes sense. Krasnys nodded, but the reality is, I'm not the Emperor of Ghis yet, and if other good lords don't nod, I will never be the Emperor of Ghis. Although Krasnys is recognized as stupid, he is not stupid enough to use a non-existent title to suppress other good lords. If they don't nod, then we have to make them turn around. Femma's tone suddenly became fierce. No one can stop the Nakros family from becoming a royal family. Are you crazy? Krasnys was shocked. You want to kill them? If they don't want to live? Is this impossible? Although half of the Unsullied in the city belong to me now, if I start a civil war with them, they will definitely unite against me. By then, we will have defeated all the Unsullied ourselves, and what will we have to trade for Ian's dragon? Krasnys said it was impossible, but his eyes were full of expectations. He hoped that his nephew, who always had a way, would come up with a doable plan. Then we have to find a way to prevent the Unsullied from participating in the war. No, to be more precise, we have to prevent the Unsullied of other good masters from participating in the war. What do you mean? We can pretend to give up the current transaction plan and let Ian trade with us with money. Let him buy 8,000 Unsullied first. Only 600 people are left as a fraction. This is in line with our trading habits and no one will doubt it. After buying the Unsullied, Ian will temporarily take them away from Astapor, and the 600 Unsullied who remain in the city of Astapor are my people. At this time, we can start to clean up those disobedient good masters. You first call them to a meeting, and then arrest them all. The guards of Astapor are vulnerable in front of the Unsullied. I only need half a day to control the situation. At that time, we will invite Ian back, return his money to him, and then we can trade according to the method you and him agreed. And by that time, you will be the only master of Astapor. This plan will require Ian's cooperation. Will he cooperate with us? Krasnys looked happy, but still doubted. This matter has no loss for him. He gets the army he wants, you get the dragon you want, and he won't need to deal with anyone other than you in Astapor in the future, which saves him a lot of trouble. I believe I can convince him. Furmore promised. Tonight. He will host a banquet for you tonight, right? Go and convince him. Convince him tonight. Krasnys agreed. After leaving the Great Pyramid of the Nakros family, Instructor Furmore met Celia in an inn. Very good, then everything will go according to plan. Celia nodded. It was expected that Krasnys would agree. Where is the list? Don't forget the conditions you promised me. Furmore handed a list to Celia. Don't worry, Instructor Furmore. Celia took the list. After getting Celia's reassurance, Furmore hurriedly left the inn and soon disappeared at the corner of the street. Celia picked up the sour persimmon wine on the table and drank it all, then took out the small notebook in her arms and ticked the box behind Attract Krasnys to the pit. This is her work record book. She still has countless tasks to do in the future, such as winning over the Unsullied instructors on Furmore's list, building the miracle that Ian will use to subdue the centaur slaves, exploring the possible resources in the surrounding area, and evaluating what crops are suitable for large-scale planting in the nearby terrain. As a mature player, it is impossible not to plant crops at all because of lack of time. Knowledge that transcends the times can be transformed into a certain value even in a very short time. The key is to choose the direction of effort and concentrate all efforts to replace this part of the value. If you want to do everything, then the end result must be that nothing is done well. The question of which aspects to focus on fell on Celia's head. She is more professional in this regard than Ian. Closing the small notebook, Celia embarked on a new road of working. She did not reject working. She knew that the more work she had, the safer she would be. No company dared to fire the sales champion, and neither did Ian. He had too many jobs that only players could do, and Ian couldn't find a replacement. If one day Ian stopped assigning work to him, he would be really worried. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 210, Finger of the Harpy. 9 boxes were opened one by one, and more than a dozen slaves spent a full hour to count the gold coins. 96,000 gold dragons, buying 8,000 unsullied, a cash transaction. Even for Astapor, such a scene is rare in a century. After paying this money, the deal is done, right? Ian asked. Opposite him were 8 Astapor good lords wearing toca robes with tassels on their robes. According to the tradition of the Gi's people, the tassels on the toca robes represent status. Among the slave traders in this shaded resting hall at the top of the pyramid, 2 wore toca robes with silver tassels, 5 wore gold tassels, and the oldest Graston's tassels were large white pearls. Krasny-Mo Nakros was only one of the 5 people with gold tassels. If it weren't for his main business being the Unsullied, and having more than half of the Unsullied instructors in Astapor, then the good thing of being the Emperor of GIs would never fall on him. Of course, Lord Ian, the old Graston with pearl tassels, responded in the vague Valyrian language. I'm sorry that we couldn't reach an agreement on further transactions. But if you are willing to pay with gold, we can still accept to provide you with non-Unsullied Ghis Legion warriors. No need, Ian refused directly. I need these 8,000 Unsullied, which is enough. Then the deal. Old Graston was the first to speak. Deal. The other good masters followed closely. Deal. Deal. 8 deals. The slave girl translated. Krasny-Mo Nakros was the last to speak. After he finished speaking, several good masters looked at him meaningfully, as if they wanted to gloat over his misfortune. Krasny-Mo Nakros wanted to laugh in his heart, but his nephew Furmore had warned him, so he could only keep a cold face at the moment and let those mocking eyes sweep across his face. You won't be arrogant for long, Krasny said secretly. You will pay the price. After cursing in his heart, Krasny stood up and walked towards Ian. The last part of the deal had to be completed by him as well, which was customary. It's called the Finger of the Harpy, and it's the highest level whip. With it, you can command the 8,000 Unsullied you've acquired and gain their absolute loyalty. Krasny handed a whip to Ian and introduced it. The handle of the Finger of the Harpy was a finely carved black dragon bone inlaid with gold, connected to 9 thin leather strips, each with a gold-plated claw on top. The weight ball at the end of the handle was a woman's head made of pure gold, with sharp ivory teeth in her mouth. Take it. Is that enough? No, Krasny shook his head. You still need to move to the punishment square first. Pride Square is too small to accommodate 8,000 Unsullied at one time. You need to go to the punishment square to make the final transfer of power with our instructors. Our instructors will confirm to the Unsullied in person that the transaction has been reached, and their obedience will be transferred to the SWIP from now on. It makes sense, Ian thought to himself. After all, Astapor is selling Unsullied at any time. If there is no complete power transfer mechanism, wouldn't the bunch of whips sold be in chaos? Although this detail is not mentioned in the original book, Daenerys raised the whip high in the punishment square to confirm to the Unsullied that the transaction has been reached, which is probably what she was doing. But the Unsullied can only understand Valyrian. You need an interpreter to command them. Krasny-Mo Nakros grabbed Missandei's shoulders and pushed her forward. Take this as our gift, a symbol of a smooth transaction. I don't know if Krasnys vented his anger towards other good masters on the little interpreter. He used too much force on his hands, and the little interpreter stumbled forward a few steps and fell to the ground. Daenerys, who was standing behind Ian, quickly stepped forward and helped her up. "Thank you, Your Majesty," the little translator said hurriedly. "Please forgive my impoliteness. It's not you who needs to apologize." Daenerys looked up at Krasnys, "But the one who pushed you." No, no, no. The little translator was extremely terrified. "I'm just a slave. How can a master apologize for hurting a slave? Don't call yourself a slave in front of me. What's your name?" "Your slave's name is Missandei." "Missandei is not." Daenerys wanted to release her on the spot and restore her freedom, but halfway through her words, Ian's words yesterday suddenly rang in her mind. "If we fail, there will never be another person to break their shackles. Not in the past thousands of years, and not in the next thousands of years. No, I can't." Daenerys struggled in her heart and finally swallowed her words back. "Come with me, you will stay by my side from now on," Daenerys said, and then pulled Missandei into Ian's entourage. "Your queen is really..." Krasnys felt it was ridiculous when he heard other slaves translate to him what Daenerys thought she should apologize to the slaves. "Too kind," Ian interrupted Krasnys, not letting him say anything that might exacerbate the conflict. "She is still young, and sometimes she can't tell the difference between high and low. Give her some time and she will naturally understand that the master is the master and the slave is the slave. You are not very old either, but you are always so sensible." Krasnys saw the steps handed over by Ian and went down. He and Ian had a great cooperation, and it was unwise to have friction over a slave. "Then please follow me to the punishment square. Please." Ian made a gesture of invitation, and after Krasny began to lead the way, he walked to Daenerys' side. "If you feel uncomfortable, you can go back to the ship first." "No," Daenerys answered firmly. "I want to see it all with my own eyes." Ian blinked, and he suddenly felt that Daenerys was more confident today than before. Was it because the big pie of abolition that he had painted for her made her feel that he was on her side, so she felt confident? "That's all. As you wish." Ian did not insist. It would be good to let Daenerys see the miserable state of the slaves in the punishment square. In this way, when she uses slaves in the future, she will involuntarily compare the state of the slaves with the slaves here. If so, Ian's future sweet shops can be called beacons of freedom. But remember, don't show any dissatisfaction, Ian reminded. Soon, Ian and his party arrived at the punishment square, which was opposite the main gate of Astapa. Once Ian completed the transaction, he could take them out of the city and wait for Krasnys to notify him to come back. There was no bronze statue here, only a wooden platform where rebellious slaves were tortured, skinned, and strangled. The good masters put it here so that it would be the first thing new slaves see when they enter the city. Missandei whispered to Daenerys. Daenerys looked at the wooden platform and saw many slaves tied to it. Their skin was peeled off in long curls like peeling apples. Daenerys almost vomited, but did not move her eyes away. "I'm the blood of the dragon," she whispered in her heart. After passing the execution platform, Daenerys finally saw this expensive army in the middle of the square. They stood in rows and rows. Each of them was made of stone without humanity. Ian was riding on a tall white horse, passing through the rows of bricks. He raised the finger of the harpy in his hand and cooperated with the instructors of the Unsullied to transfer power. When Ian finished the last row of squares, Daenerys knew that these brick eunuchs were now hers. Chapter 211, Lord of Astapa, Part 1. It was not until the morning of the second day after Ian's army left Astapa that Krasnys' messenger caught up with his team on the ancient Giscari coastal road. After being told that Astapa had changed its mind and decided to accept the transaction conditions he had proposed before and lent the 3 pyramids in the city to him, Ian felt at a loss, but he still agreed to the conditions of the Astapa people and ordered the army to return. So on the afternoon of the third day, after leaving the city, Ian rode the white horse through the main gate of Astapa and entered the punishment square again. The air here was still filled with a strong smell of blood as usual, but unlike when he left, there were no more slaves nailed to death in the square at this moment. There were no good masters in Astapa. Just after Ian left yesterday, Krasner's MO Nakros directly sent troops to surround the good masters who were preparing to divide the money and arrested them on the spot. Then the Unsullied of Fema cleansed the power of several major families in the city and began to call themselves the Lords of Astapa. Of the 8 great families that were once prominent in Astapa, only the Kurvitz family, which was close to the Nakros family, was completely preserved. 3 of the other good lord families were purged, including Old Graston, who could once decorate his toca robe with pearl tassels. His family had the largest share of trade in Astapa. They owned vast farmlands and tens of thousands of serfs and labor slaves on the east bank of the Worm River. These 3 good lords were nailed to death in the punishment square because they refused to submit and insulted Krasny Mo Nakros, and his family was also bloodily massacred. The pyramids of their families were all cleared out by Instructor Fermor and provided to Ian. The last 3 good lord families were reshuffled after the heads of their families were arrested by Fermor. The Unsullied instructors and their families, who were previously bribed by Celia at Ian's banquet, became the new heads of their families. After these people swore allegiance to the Lord of Krasny, the 3 families were preserved. The sun shines in through the diamond-shaped green glass windows embedded in the slanted wall, casting a refreshing green light in the hall. From time to time, a breeze blows in from the terrace outside, bringing in the fragrance of flowers and fruits from the garden. Krasny's Mo Nakros sits high on the main seat. This time, there are no 7 good masters of equal status around him. The nobles of Astapa who have been retained stand on the right side of the hall like subjects. On the left side of the hall are Ian's men, including Roll, Kez, Dorian the Black Falcon, Bronn and other old subordinates, as well as newly elected Unsullied officers such as Grey Worm. This is the top floor hall of the pyramid, but it is still no problem to accommodate hundreds of people. The hall is clean, tidy and has extremely luxurious decorations. Ian has to admit that the Pyramid of the Gis is a masterpiece of architectural art. I think I need an explanation, Ian said in the middle of the hall, after saluting the new master of Astapa and a group of nobles. What happened in Astapa during my absence? The news I got was that the good masters of Astapa changed their minds and decided to trade with me according to the previous conditions. But when I returned to Astapa, you told me that there were no good masters in the city. The little translator Miss Andy loudly translated Ian's words into Valyrian. At this moment, she stood behind Ian and was no longer afraid when facing her former master. What's going on? You clearly said that you have convinced Ian. Krasny Mo Nakros frowned after hearing this, and he turned to his nephew Fermor beside him and questioned him. It would be risky to tell an outsider about our plan in advance. It's not too late to convince him now. Fermor argued in a low voice. He knew that Ian wanted to completely distance himself from the internal struggle in Astapa. As you can see, Astapa now has only one master, and that is me, Krasny said directly without further hesitation. So you can rest assured about our deal, and don't need to worry about anyone interfering with us. This is too dishonorable. You actually slaughtered other colleagues for your own selfish interests. You tarnished the pride of the Gis people, and you tarnished the reputation of Astapa. Ian shook his head, still questioning in his tone. After the little black girl Miss Andy translated Ian's words loudly, Ian noticed that the Astapa nobles standing on the left side of the hall began to whisper, but out of fear of Krasny who had just completed a massacre in Astapa, they cautiously did not make any expression. Maybe I should reconsider our agreement. After questioning, Ian said disappointedly, what did you say? Krasny felt ridiculous. Who can give you an iron army in 2 years except Astapa? The army is not as good as reputation. If people know that I made a deal with the traitor, how will the world look at me? Ian pretended to hesitate for a moment, but finally shook his head to indicate that he could not accept it. If there is nothing else, we are leaving. Then Ian waved to his men, signaling them to leave with him. How did things turn out like this? Krasny was puzzled, but he knew that he could never let Ian leave like this. If Ian gave up the deal and took away the 8,000 Unsullied, given his previous atrocities and the ambitions exposed by them, the forces of the cleansed families outside the city would inevitably launch a counterattack. The temporarily surrendered Astapa nobles in the city would also be ready to move, and young Kain Mireen would not mind clearing out an ambitious person who dared to attack his colleagues. By then, I'm afraid I will die without a burial place. Convince him quickly. You idiot. In a panic, Krasnys looked at his nephew who was standing next to him. You said you can guarantee that he will cooperate with us. Maybe you remembered it wrong. I said I can guarantee that he will cooperate with me. Instructor Fermor whispered. Since Krasnys became the Lord of Astapor, the seats were adjusted so that there was no one around them, and Fermor was not worried about being heard. What do you mean, Uncle Krasnys? Instructor Fermor suddenly raised his voice, so loud that everyone in the hall could hear it. Out of loyalty to the family, I have always followed your lead. Perhaps attracted by the sudden change in the hall, Ian and others stopped at the door, as if they wanted to see what happened. You asked me to take Astapor for you, and I did it without hesitation. Fermor said sadly. You asked me to kill those nobles, which made me very tormented, but I still did it, because you are my uncle, the head of the Nakros family. But this time your order is too much. I'm sorry I can't accept it. As Fermor said, he walked down the stairs and leaned to the side of other Astapor nobles. What the hell did I give an excessive order? Krasny was a little confused, and he didn't understand a word of his nephew's words. Chapter 212, Lord of Astapor, Part 2. What did the Lord of the city just say to you? An unsullied instructor who had just become the head of the family asked Fermor hurriedly. He said that, if Ian's Unsullied evacuated Astapor, our safety would not be guaranteed. He was worried that there would be traitors among you, so he would invite all the remaining nobles of Astapor to a banquet tonight, and then let me slaughter you all. Instructor Fermor said angrily. Krasnys is crazy. The Unsullied instructor who had just become the head of the family said immediately. We have sworn allegiance. He still won't let us go. Another Unsullied instructor who became the head of the family immediately echoed. We can't let such a person be our lord of the city. The third one spoke up immediately. Under their leadership, the nobles of Astapor who had been suppressed for a long time in the hall suddenly became noisy, and even the members of the Nakros family began to question whether such a future emperor could bring power and glory to the family. You betrayed me? Krasnys finally realized something. This place was quite far from where the nobles were standing, but Krasnys could still hear clearly the undisguised discussions of the crowd. You want to betray me? Krasnys was furious. He raised the harper's finger in his hand. Unsullied, listen to my orders. Take down these traitors. Krasnys glanced at Ian and the others standing at the door. He wanted to take them down as well, but after thinking about the comparison between 600 and 8,000, he gave up this absurd idea. What surprised Krasnys was that the Unsullied who had obeyed his orders before were now standing still like bricks, completely ignoring his orders. He looked at Fermor, then at the whip in his hand. His whole hand was shaking. You have already stolen the power of the whip. The 600 Unsullied who were left were trained by Fermor himself. If he ordered the Unsullied to still be the first obedient object when handing over the power to the whip, then the Unsullied would not be able to execute the whip holder's order to hurt Fermor. Take the lord of the city back to the room temporarily, and don't hurt him. Fermor immediately ordered the Unsullied, and the Unsullied naturally chose to obey his order. Damn it, you traitor. Krasny roared, while being sandwiched between two Unsullied, and leaving the hall through a small door on the side. Krasny has gone crazy. Fermor said helplessly to several elders of the Nakros family. The three elders looked at each other, and no one spoke. They knew what Fermor wanted to express, but they were not willing to be at his mercy. Krasnys has gone mad. The head of another family echoed Fermor. The city of Astapor needs a new master. His words did not resonate with the nobles. Why don't we restore the rule of the benevolent lord? A noble immediately retorted. This is the tradition of Astapor. Once the tradition is destroyed, there is no going back. Krasnys massacred the three major families. In the eyes of outsiders, we are all his accomplices. We didn't. But we swore allegiance to him. Do you think the remnants of Voltgraston in the upper reaches of the Worm River will believe our explanation? Then what should we do? We must let the army of the Queen of the West help solve the future troubles in Astapor. But her pretty boy has no intention of interfering in the internal affairs of Astapor at all. Then we must convince him to fulfill the deal we had previously discussed with Astapor. We want to train an army for him, and he must protect Astapor. But he clearly rejected the deal, because he believed that cooperating with Krasnys Nakros would damage his honor. That's why I said Astapa needs a new city lord. A city lord who can convince the Andals to stay. As soon as several unsullied instructors and family heads finished speaking, they looked at Fermor Nakros in unison. This is against the rules. Fermor waved his hand and refused. Krasny is my elder and the head of the Nakros family. No matter what mistakes he made, Fermor was communicating with several unsullied instructors, but his eyes were on several elders in the family. They are right, Fermor. An elder interrupted Fermor. Krasny is crazy. He is no longer suitable to continue to be the mayor of Astapa, and naturally he is not suitable to continue to be the head of the Nakros family. I think you are very suitable. As soon as he finished speaking, the other two elders also echoed. After listening to the words of these new leaders, how could the three elders not understand that this group of unsullied instructors have formed an alliance? Fermor hoped to get their support because of family friendship. If they don't know what's good for them, there will be many empty racks in the punishment square. Fermor refused again and finally took over the title of mayor out of necessity. I will try to convince that Andal. Fermor assured everyone, then left the hall and caught up with Ian and others who had already left after watching the excitement at the bottom of the pyramid. Congratulations, Lord Fermor. Celia was the first to congratulate Fermor. Thank you, lady. Fermor returned the salute, then looked at Ian. I have seized control of Astapa as agreed. In the next 2 years, I will train the army for you according to your requirements, and you can freely use Astapa's resources. In return, I will conquer the entire Slavers Bay before returning to Westeros. I will only take the fleet, and all the cities will be left to you. Ian once again confirmed Celia's agreement with Fermor. I will serve you with all my heart. Fermor saluted Ian according to the tradition of the Gi's people. The request to conquer Slavers Bay was made by Fermor on his own initiative. Originally, Celia only wanted to use the position of Lord of Astapa and dragon taming skills to get him for free. Unexpectedly, after she had worked so hard to persuade Fermor, he actually said that he did not want dragons. He wanted Ian to conquer Yunque and Meereen before returning to Westeros, and then leave all 3 cities to him. In order to convince Celia, Fermor also elaborated on a series of benefits, such as capturing Meereen's fleet could help Ian transport the army back to Westeros, leaving all 3 cities in Slavers Bay to him, and he could continuously provide Ian with slave armies in the protracted Continental Conquest War. Even Ian had to admit that, if he was really an aboriginal who aimed to regain the Iron Throne, he would definitely be convinced by him. He is a very thoughtful person. This is Celia's evaluation of him. Do you have any other questions? Ian noticed that Fermor was a little hesitant to speak. That's right, Fermor was pointed out by Ian, so he stopped struggling. I do have some troubles that I need your help with. Although my Unsullied have successfully settled the troubles in Astapa, they are unable to reach the industries outside the city of those families who rebelled against the Good Masters. He labeled the 3 purged families as rebels. I hope you can send troops to help me recover the fields and industries on both sides of the Worm River and eliminate the remnants of the Good Masters. I said at the beginning that I don't want to be involved in the internal strife of Astapa in any sense. Ian refused immediately. If I'm willing to dirty my own hands, what else do I need you for? You provide me with value, and I will provide you with rewards. As long as Fermor hesitated, but decided to give up some of his interests in order to cut the grass and roots it out. If you are willing to do this favor, then all the industries you recover will be yours for the next 2 years. Anyway, the entire Slave Bay will be mine after you leave, so these 2 years won't be a big deal. Reintroduce this request to me when you convene a meeting of the nobles tomorrow. Ian did not refuse this time. He gave too much. Discard the rhetoric related to the Good Master or the Civil War. I was deceived by you to suppress the rebellion. Do you understand? As you wish. Chapter 213, Junior Officer's Manual. Tell me, how are things going? Ian sat in a new study room he had opened at the top of the pyramid and received Celia, who came to report on her work. Aren't my every move under your watch? Celia asked back and then raised the orange cat to her chest. But I don't know which problems you can solve by yourself and which problems require my instructions. Ian stopped writing, so you'd better tell me in person. What are you writing? Celia was not in a hurry to report, but became interested in the book in Ian's hand. A manual for grassroots officers, written in Common and Valyrian. To be honest, sometimes I really doubt the maturity of High Valyrian. Many simple expressions in Chinese require a long sentence to explain in Valyrian. Ian said as he handed the unfinished manual to Celia. After he threw all the work to Celia, most of his time was free. Therefore, in the past half month, Ian basically either watched the training of the Gith slave soldiers in the Unsullied camp or read the military works of the Gith in the study. He moved all the military books in the Astapa library into his own study. Although the military theory of this world is more backward than most of the military books Ian has read, it is always good to increase some understanding. Ian believes that there are 2 sentences in the first chapter of Sun Tzu's Art of War, the beginning of strategy, which are very important for the understanding of reading military books. It is not the well-known war is the way of deception, but momentum is to control power. By taking advantage in this victory of military strategists cannot be passed on in advance. The meaning of these 2 sentences is momentum is to take different corresponding measures according to the needs of our side to establish advantages and seize the initiative in war. And these are the secrets of military strategists to win the war, which cannot be stipulated and explained in advance. Together, they point out one thing, that is, reading a military book is not a process of copying formulas. If you read a military book with the mentality of copying formulas, it is as outrageous as memorizing examples. To take the college entrance examination, you can't do an original question in the college entrance examination, and you can't encounter the same situation as in the book in war. To be precise, the situation encountered in war is far more complicated than the test questions. A test question, even the most difficult one, has only a few variables, but for war, the number of soldiers, weapons, training level, morale, fatigue, hunger, the ability, prestige, experience of generals, the type and height of terrain. These are all variables. Even the weather is a variable. There is a saying that the heavy rain that fell at Waterloo the night before June 18th, 1815, a few more or fewer drops was the key to victory or failure for Napoleon. The mud caused by the heavy rain seriously delayed the actions of the French artillery, forcing Napoleon to postpone the general offensive many times, buying time for the reinforcement of the coalition forces to arrive. Those who ignore certain variables and copy the response methods in the book are as fatal as undercalculating a certain force when doing a mechanics problem. Therefore, if we compare fighting a war to the college entrance examination, Ian believes that reading military books is closer to doing exercises. You may not encounter the original questions in the exam, but you can always answer the questions you have practiced many times more easily. When facing new questions that you have never seen before, those who have seen more questions are often more likely to answer them. Be broad-minded and selective, accumulate knowledge and then release it. The art of using troops lies in change. Ordinary people read military books for the purpose of mastering the words power due to profit. Of course, someone said that although Li Jing, the military god of the Tang dynasty, read the textbooks and practiced a lot of questions, he always went against the formula in every exam. Isn't he also the top scorer in the college entrance examination? There is no other reason. Li Jing mastered the essence of power due to profit and dared to take various anti-routine actions boldly. In the end, Li Jing also wrote The Art of War himself and became the question setter himself, turning the new questions he had seen into examples for future generations to practice. At this time, someone will ask, Champion Marquis Hu Okubeng not only did not practice questions, he didn't even read textbooks. Didn't he still become the top scorer in the college entrance examination? Ian couldn't refute this, so he used the word ordinary people in the beginning. There are always some people in the world who can get high scores without doing exercises and can grasp the essence of making power based on benefits without reading The Art of War. But in the vast history, how many heroes like Hu Okubeng are there that even the heavens would envy? Ian doesn't think he is a genius, so his choice is to read more military books and do more exercises. Although he can't become a peerless general, it is still easy to bully people in the world of ice and fire. The book he is writing now is a manual for lower level officers that meets the conditions of the current era, which he wrote based on the military books he had read before and the actual inspection in the Unsullied training camp recently. The 20,000 Ghis Legion slaves promised by Astapor are not enough for Ian's ambitions. He also needs to train more other types of soldiers, so it is particularly important to train a group of grassroots officers of his own. So far, Ian has completed the following parts: selecting soldiers, organizing troops and training. The first step is to select soldiers. Basically, it follows Ki Jigwang's experience in selecting civilians. What kind of people are suitable for soldiers, and what kind of people are suitable for what kind of soldiers? Ian cannot accept the traditional Astapor method of buying slaves all at once, and then killing the eliminated ones during training. Population is very important to Ian at this stage. He is also short of people in the industrial and agricultural fields. Therefore, his army needs to be carefully selected in the selection of soldiers step, and try to select a good seedling to invest training resources in a targeted manner. Whether it is his own new army or the GI's slaves trained by Astapor, they will need to follow Ian's orders on selection of soldiers in the future. He will use the eliminated slaves in this step for other purposes. The second step is to organize troops. When Ian was a child, he often saw how famous generals would arrange troops in various works. Later, after reading more, he realized that the on-the-spot arrangement of troops was basically nonsense. How an army can be arranged has actually been decided in the organization step. First, we need to organize the squads, squadrons, and battalions, for example, and then we can drill the soldiers according to the teams and train them to obey the corresponding orders of drums, banners, and flags. Only then can the generals really play the role of command on the battlefield. If there are no such subjects in peacetime, the generals can only decide which arms to put where on the battlefield. Once the two sides touch the enemy, the army will lose command. No matter what name he has, it can only play the role of boosting morale. This is far from the requirement of all warriors should defend the right and win with the odd. P.S. The odd here is the odd of odd and even. The regular soldiers refer to the main combat troops, and the odd soldiers refer to the reserve troops. In Ian's conception, his new army will be trained in small formations for use in complex terrain or urban street fighting. The Ghis Legion trained by the workers of Astapor needs to be improved in the form of the Swiss phalanx. The core is to introduce the training and use of halberds, and to obtain greater lethality when facing heavily armed enemy troops, by mixing spears and halberds. Chapter 214 5th Class Slavery. In addition, Ian also added crossbowmen to each team. Crossbows do not require long-term training like bows and arrows. They can quickly form an army by recruiting slaves. The only problem is the supply of crossbows and crossbow arrows. Slave Bay lacks the corresponding industrial chain, and Ian needs to find a way by himself. Ian also needs to find a way to mass produce half-body plate armor for soldiers. Both problems require industrial progress. The former is relatively easy to solve. Crossbows are not new in this world. As long as you offer a high price and openly recruit, you can always find good craftsmen. The latter requires Ian to light up the two technology trees of blast furnace steel making and hydraulic forging hammer. There are many details to deal with here, but fortunately Ian has a diligent secretary. He packaged the specific operations of these two things and the experiment of trying to make gunpowder and handed them over to Celia. The third step of the manual is to train soldiers, which is roughly divided into 5 subjects: training ears and eyes, training courage, training cues, training physical strength, and training weapons. Training ears and eyes, to understand the orders of drums and banners. The battlefield is noisy. A battle that can be commanded by voice can be called a rural fight in the Celestial Empire. An army of 10,000 people must know the commander's orders through the sound of drums and banners. Needless to say, training courage is useless. Soldiers without courage are useless, and will collapse at the first blow. Training formations is for discipline and obedience. Physical strength and weapons are the foundation of soldiers and the most core skills. Although it is said that just practicing 1-2-1 marching in unison is already a big step ahead of the peasant conscripts of this era, Ian will face players in the future after all, and there is no point in comparing with the natives. The next part Ian has to complete is rewards and punishments. A strict reward and punishment system plays a vital role in the morale of the army, which must not be ignored. In addition, Ian also plans to add some things about camps and terrain judgment for reference by junior officers, but those contents are too specific, and even Ian himself did not remember too much, so he planned to discuss this part with the Unsullied instructors. Anyway, it was still early for him to use the troops, so there was no rush. Finally, Celia finished reading the officer manual that Ian handed over and handed it back. "How is it?" Ian asked casually. "Not bad, right?" "What do you mean, not bad? I don't really understand it, but..." Celia hesitated. "Say." Ian raised his eyebrows. "The High Valyrian version has a lot of grammatical errors and wrong words." Celia couldn't help laughing. Ian pulled the corners of his mouth. His High Valyrian language was only the basic, provided by the system, and the level of studying with Dina is for a period of time. It was indeed a bit difficult to use it to write a book, so how about this? You find time to help me translate it?" Ian said leisurely. The smile on Celia's face stopped abruptly. "Working overtime again?" "Just kidding." Ian was very satisfied with Celia's reaction, so he stopped making things difficult for her. "I was just worried about not being able to find something for Daenerys to do. At her age, and at this stage, she shouldn't be idle like this." Yes. Celia nodded quickly. "I still have a lot of things on my hands." "Okay, tell me quickly, what do you need to report to me? Where should I start?" "The situation on the east bank of the Worm River," Ian replied. Previously, Fermor, the Lord of Astapor, formally asked him for help in suppressing the rebellion at the court meeting, so he asked Roland Bronn to take 3,000 Unsullied to the east bank of the Worm River. Oh, Roland his army wiped out several remnants of the Good Lord family as soon as they arrived at the east bank and controlled the situation. Tens of thousands of hectares of farmland on both sides of the Worm River and a large number of pastures, logging sites, quarries, and mines have been controlled by us. How many resources have been obtained specifically? Ian was more concerned about the spot. Roland his men couldn't count, and they even had trouble counting slaves, Celia reported. He asked us to send some people who can count to help in the letter, but I don't think this will solve the problem. What do you mean? Rol's advance caused the remaining forces of the Good Master along the Worm River to flee. Seeing their master flee, the slaves there also fled, and they stole a lot of things before leaving. Rol mobilized a large number of Unsullied to catch the escaped slaves, but the effect was not obvious. In the process, they suffered casualties from time to time. And the slaves who stayed behind were also dishonest. They lied that they were free GI's farmers. Anyway, their masters were gone, and they perjured each other, which brought great trouble to Roland his work. If it weren't for the fact that slaves themselves were property, Bronn would even want to kill these guys. Expected resistance. Ian shrugged and took out a notebook. 5th level slavery draft. Celia read out the title on the notebook. The above is the new rules I set for the slaves. You can take a look at what has been deleted or added. Ian smiled. Generally speaking, Ian is reluctant to touch the reform of social system and law. Most of these are things that will benefit future generations, but harm the present. The benefits in the short term will definitely not outweigh the troubles, especially those things that subvert people's cognition and traditions. Even if you have absolute force, it will take generations to digest its side effects. What Ian lacks most is time. Therefore, in the reform of these issues, Ian prefers to take the approach that fits the general values of the local people. For example, grading slaves. You all think that the existence of slaves is normal. Then I won't change this. I will rank my own slaves according to their status as slaves. You shouldn't have any objections, right? The last level is the royal slaves who are directly under Queen Daenerys and can be promoted only after making special contributions. Although they are still slaves, they will have a status similar to that of the nobles of Ghis. Celia smacked her lips after reading it. Giving slaves a path to advancement will greatly reduce their rebellious mood. Even if they rebel, they will hate the slaves above them the most, rather than their masters. When trouble comes, the masters only need to kill a few higher-level slaves who are blamed to appease their anger. "You are so dirty," she commented, and then asked, "Then what is the specific way for slaves to be promoted? Guess why I gave you a semi-finished product?" Ian looked at her, as if she were a fool. Chapter 215 Everyone is a snitch. You can slowly add specific promotion systems later. There's no rush for this. The unscrupulous boss casually added a new task to the secretary, but now we can open some temporary promotion channels. Use it to solve the problem of slaves in the Worm River. Celia immediately guessed Ian's idea. The first 1,000 slaves who register with role can be directly promoted to the 3rd class. Ian said the first one. Originally, Astapa's food rations for slaves were very small. Even if it was increased to 1/3 or 1/4 of the original, it was still just enough to barely fill their stomachs. It was not a big expense for Ian. Reporting slaves disguised as civilians can directly promote them to the 3rd class. Reporting more than 3 people can directly obtain the status of slave foreman while being promoted to the 3rd class, and the people he reported will be incorporated into his team. Ian then said the second promotion path. Those who report thieves and the hiding places of their property will be promoted to the 3rd rank directly if their information is valid. If a large amount of property is recovered, they will be promoted to the 2nd rank slaves. The reported people will be under their jurisdiction, and 10% of the recovered property will belong to the reporter. Those who report the hiding places of escaped slaves and provide valid information will be promoted to the 3rd rank directly. If more than 5 escaped slaves are captured, based on their information, they will be promoted to the 2nd rank slave, and the escaped slaves captured by them will be under their jurisdiction. Those who assist the Unsullied in capturing escaped slaves will be promoted to the 3rd rank, as long as they capture 1 escaped slave personally. If they capture 3 or more, they will be promoted to the 2nd rank slave, and the escaped slaves captured by them will be under their jurisdiction. For this slave catching operation, the 10 people with the most outstanding contributions will be promoted to the 1st rank slaves. Each of them will be rewarded with a set of real estate and 3 2nd rank slaves as subordinates. In addition, let Lord Fermor notify Yunque and ask them to send troops to the border to capture slaves who have fled to their side. We are willing to pay 1/3 of the value of each slave for labor fees to redeem them. It is a tradition for slave city-states to help each other hunt down runaway slaves. Ian is not worried that Yunque will cheat or even cheat, so Ian has sufficient reasons to accept runaway slaves from Yunque. What? Why are there runaway slaves in Yunque? Hehe, the wise masters of Yunque will know when the time comes. That's about it. If you think of anything, you can always tell me, Ian said and looked at Celia. This will cause huge conflicts among slaves, especially the rule that those who have been backstabbed will work under the backstabber. Celia thought for a while and commented, this way, slaves cannot form small groups. This may delay production. Then set hard indicators. If a team does not meet the standards, all members will lose the qualification for promotion forever. This must be made clear to the slaves. If they and the foreman lose the qualification for promotion, it means that they can only work under this backstabber for the rest of their lives, and the backstabber who loses the qualification for promotion will torture them even more. I don't need to say more, right? Fuck. Celia couldn't help but burst out with a swear word. Now, Ian waved his hand. Let's talk about work first. In addition, when designing the promotion mechanism later, you must ensure that each slave team is in a fierce competitive relationship, while the competition within the team is smaller. This will make the relationship between all 2nd and 3rd class slaves rigid, while the 4th class slaves within each team maintain a certain degree of unity, which will be beneficial to production. Ian continued. I have another question. Celia seemed to have suddenly thought of something. Will the reporting mechanism you just mentioned lead to slaves falsely accusing free people of being slaves in order to get promoted? Or worse, falsely accusing free people of being stolen slaves, so that the free people's own property becomes stolen goods? Tell me, what were most of the slaves in Slave Bay before? What do you mean? Who were the slaves before they were captured as slaves? This, Celia probably guessed what Ian meant, and she asked tentatively, free people. Free people from Lazarlin, Dothraki, Summer Isles and the Jade Sea. Ian added, then tell me, why can't the free people of Ghis be slaves? Are you going to make the best of a bad situation? Is it my fault that the slaves falsely accuse them? This pot can't be put on me. Ian shrugged, just arrest someone if they report it. If this is really implemented, and others follow suit, I'm afraid no free people outside the city will be spared. Why do we need free people in Slave Bay? Without the free people, won't the entire Worm River be ours? The nobles of Astapor will have opinions. Then you should settle their opinions. Ian felt that this sentence was a bit empty, as if the leader asked you to do something, but didn't pay you. So he added, if they make demands on some free people or slaves and provide evidence, for those who are not excessive, give them, and speak nicely. What about those who are excessive? Give me the list of those who make excessive demands, and I will tell them what excessive means. Ian narrowed his eyes. In addition, tell the nobles of Astapor that I will compensate them in other ways. In short, it is necessary to turn all the free people into slaves. On the one hand, it is convenient for us to manage the development and management of the entire Worm River Basin. On the other hand, if the slave team expands by tens of thousands of GI's people, they and the original slaves are natural enemies. They will each keep an eye on each other for us, and look for opportunities to inform on us at all times. With these layers of hatred, even if a player is the reincarnation of the head of state, don't think about causing trouble in my slave team, where everyone is an informer. Celia's eyes widened. Only then did she understand the deep meaning of Ian's adding so much hatred to the slaves. Perhaps because she had never met a player since she followed Ian, she almost forgot that this was not a standalone game. No matter how strict the defense is against players, such a stupid creature, it is not excessive. After what Ian did, Celia basically foresaw the fate of players who dared to incite freedom in the slave team. On one hand, they had to fight for their freedom with the Unsullied, and on the other hand, they only needed to be an informer to get promoted. Which slave was so noble that he would choose the former? By the way, Ian interrupted Celia's contemplation. Speaking of this, you can also add the option of joining the army to the promotion mechanism of the slave level. This will be the fastest promotion channel. My new army and the slave soldiers of the GI's Legion in Astapor will include these slaves in the scope of selection. This was Ian's temporary thought. If he bought soldiers from other citizen slave traders as planned, those newly slaved original freemen would definitely not be as obedient as these laborers who have been slaves for many years. And those who have not yet accepted the fact that they are slaves will definitely not be as enthusiastic about Ian's promotion mechanism as these senior slaves. Those newly bought slaves and the freemen that Raul and his team are about to capture in the Worm River Basin need to be trained in the Worm River for 2 years. Only when they actively integrate into the slave promotion mechanism can they become new good sources of soldiers. Chapter 216 Division of Labor between Boss and Secretary. Is that all? Ian asked. No, there is another thing. Celia shook her head. Raul caught old Graston in the manor outside the city. He is the grandson of the good master wearing the pearl tasseled toca robe. He wants to know how to deal with this matter. Ian, who was a little sleepy, suddenly became much more energetic. Who knows about this? He asked hurriedly. Raul, Bronn, to Unsullied, me and you. Then let him go. Ian said immediately. No, that's not right. He quickly changed his words. Like this, let my new NPC champion Gladiator Samu rush into the boy's residence in the middle of the night, rescue him and take him to Meereen, to cry to the great masters about Furmore's atrocities. Don't you want to offend Meereen in the short term? Without violating Meereen's core interests, do they dare to offend me who has 8,000 Unsullied? Ian sneered. Meereen won't make any moves, but Furmore and the others will feel a thorn in their side because of the enemy's escape from death, and thus deepen their dependence on us. Celia thought for a while and said, Yin alone cannot grow, Yang alone cannot grow, Yin and Yang are balanced. Ian said this in his native language instead of the common language. We and the enemy are two opposing sides that must exist. The enemy is endless. If the external enemy is eliminated, new enemies will appear inside. Ensuring the existence of external enemies is the key to ensuring internal unity. Since we can easily create an enemy that poses no threat to us, what reason is there not to do it? And if we let NPC Sama gain the trust of old Graston's grandson, we can have another mouthpiece in Meereen. Yin alone cannot grow, Yang alone cannot grow, Celia repeated in a low voice, and then smiled. I have no other questions. Then, Ian made a gesture to see him off. I believe you still have a lot of work to do. Goodbye. Celia bowed slightly and got up to leave. As soon as the 5th class slavery and temporary promotion conditions were announced, an absurd carnival immediately broke out in the Worm River Basin. Under the crazy backstabbing of slaves and the false accusations of slaves against freemen, the originally chaotic situation soon began to become more chaotic. Of course, this refers to the degree, rather than the time. After just 2 weeks, everything calmed down. With the appearance of the first batch of high-level slaves, the entire Worm River Basin began to enter an indescribable state of order. Depressed, heavy, everyone is like a machine. They dare not say a word to their companions, fearing that they will accidentally become the object of informing. Anyone who has seen this kind of order will involuntarily think of the word purgatory. Of course, Ian did not see these scenes, at least not with his own eyes, because he never left the city of Astapor. During this period of time, Ian finished the first draft of his officer manual and asked the slave scribe to copy dozens of copies. After that, Ian selected 20 people from his Black Falcon guards and Xia Ze nobles as his new army officers. Originally, Ian planned to select half from each side. Unfortunately, Ian only found 4 officers who could speak Valyrian in his direct guard. Since all his soldiers were native speakers of Valyrian, Ian could not select some officers who spoke the common language. As a last resort, he could only recruit all the remaining officers from the Ghis people. Most of them were nobles, but there was also a civilian and a newly promoted second-class slave. For the latter, Ian directly promoted him to a first-class slave, to set a good example for other slaves. Ian was personally responsible for the officer selection process from beginning to end. Most of the officers he selected came from the families of the unsullied instructors, who themselves had certain military qualities. Moreover, choosing the young nobles of Astapor to be officers of his new army was also Ian's compensation to the nobles of Astapor in the Worm River slave annexation operation. Most of these people were second sons who had no inheritance rights in their families. For them, being able to follow a restorer to conquer a distant continent was far better than being a side branch with no status in the family. And their families were also happy to let the second sons roll as far away as possible. After the generals were selected, Ian began to take time out every day to teach them. Before officially letting them start to select new soldiers, he arranged a 2-month course for them. During Ian's teaching, many unsullied instructors who were responsible for training the slave soldiers of the Gith Legion next door came to take classes, so he simply went all out and put on the traditional toca robe of the Gith people and began to regard himself as a spiritual Gith person. This move undoubtedly won the unanimous favor of the nobles of Astapor. While Ian was leisurely building the new army, Celia was busy half to death. She first sent people to collect enough sulfur, saltpeter and charcoal, and experimented with a configuration of gunpowder according to the proportion. But unfortunately, no matter how many times she tried, even trying to change the proportion in the formula, the gunpowder failed to detonate successfully. In desperation, she could only guess in the summary report to Ian whether this world with magic was essentially different from the Earth in some aspects. After temporarily losing the hope of obtaining gunpowder, the urgency of building a crossbow factory inevitably increased to a higher level. So Celia quickly invested money to build the first factory, after hiring some craftsmen with a large sum of money and purchasing a large number of slaves in Meereen. Although it will take some time before it can officially start production, this matter is on the right track. Celia also dealt with the problem of the plate armor production factory. Blast furnace iron making and hydraulic forging hammers are not processes that require technological breakthroughs. Under Celia's guidance, the professionals recruited/purchased with a large sum of money quickly completed the drawings of the relevant equipment and put them into production of the first batch of equipment. Although the hydraulic hammer cannot produce homogeneous iron plates, which will lead to uneven thickness and quality of the finished plate armor processed by hand, these are not important for the requirement of armored infantry. Ian's only requirement for the production of plate armor in the new factory is output. There is no time to wait for the results here. After finishing the work in Astapor, Celia rushed to the east bank of the Worm River without stopping. After arriving at the manor, where all was stationed upstream of the Worm River, Celia immediately began to count their gains from this operation, and began to coordinate the specific production work of the slaves. The staple food in Slaver Bay is bread, and the main food crop here is wheat. But according to Celia's statistics, more than half of the farmland on both sides of the Worm River is used to grow other cash crops such as olives, cherries, figs, dates, melons, pomegranates, walnuts, green peppers, grapes and carrots. Although the slaves are starving, and Astapor staple food needs to be imported, for the nobles of Astapor, their enjoyment of life is the top priority. Such an agricultural structure is obviously incompatible with the crisis of the long night is coming, so in Celia's initial plan, she will cut off most of the crops and use most of the land and slaves to grow staple food. This staple food is tentatively set to be wheat, but before leaving Astapor, Celia had already ordered people to go to the ports of nearby major cities, to contact sea merchants from all over the world, and try to purchase seeds of high-yield crops from them. If she can successfully find potatoes, corn or rice, she will conduct further research on the nearby land, and decide on the final planting plan. There is no spring and autumn in this world, only long summer and long winter. In the summer, crops can be planted and harvested uninterruptedly. The climate in Slaver Bay is mild and the land is fertile. She needs to use the tail of this long summer to stockpile enough food to supply a certain population to fight against the long night before it officially falls. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 217 War Preparation. Near the end of the month, Ian received Celia's first paper report. Although he had understood most of the situation through the cat's perspective, he had not fallen behind in this process. The first round of statistics showed that the number of slaves that Roll and his team had registered in the Worm River was 117,000, not including those who had not yet been captured, and those who would be sent back by Young K in the future. The food they seized was also concentrated, but the total amount was not large, and was even far less than the food reserves in Astapor. If Ian's new slave policy was followed to supply food to the more than 120,000 slaves on both sides of the Worm River, the food would only be enough for them to eat for less than half a year at most. This was probably the reason why the population of Slavers Bay was so small. During the long summer, the nobles did not reserve food for the slaves to survive the winter. When the food production dropped sharply in winter, Slavers Bay is located in the south, and it can barely be planted in winter. If it were in the north, not a single grain of millet could be planted. More than half of the slaves would starve to death. The nobles only need to buy new slaves from the Dothraki or other slave traders when the long summer comes again to fill the gaps in the land on the Worm River, so they don't need to consider these troublesome problems. But for Ian, who is expanding his army on a large scale and will use troops soon, the grain reserves in Astapor are definitely not enough. The wheat that has been planted on both sides of the Worm River will mature in about 3 months at the earliest, and the wheat that Celia has planted, after rejecting other crops, will mature in 5 months. In order to solve this problem, a large-scale grain import plan was put on the agenda by Ian. The largest production area west of Essos is undoubtedly Volantis. They have extremely vast farmland and more than 10 million serfs in the Rhoyne River and Siruho River basin, and are the largest grain exporter in the Western world. Unfortunately, considering the land distance from Volantis to Astapor, the possibility of importing grain from Volantis by land transportation is zero. Shipping by sea is barely feasible, but because it is impossible to cross the Sea of Smoke, the grain ships need to go around the entire ancient Valyrian peninsula to travel between Volantis and Astapor, which means that the freight for each trip will be 5 to 10 times more than the cost of the grain itself. Therefore, Ian can only turn his attention to the closest Khazarban River basin, where Meereen controls the area to the west and the Lazarin territory to the east. Meereen is the traditional main importer of grain for Astapor. Although the land in the Khazarban River basin is not much more fertile than the Worm River, its population is much larger than that of the Worm River, and the area of land that has been developed there is much larger than that of the Worm River. After repeated consideration, Ian decided to increase the scale of grain imports to Meereen. First, this is one of his few options, and second, deepening trade ties with Meereen can also give the other party an illusion that he has no hostility. As for whether Meereen will take this opportunity to raise prices, Ian doesn't care. Anyway, every penny he spends in Meereen will be taken back sooner or later with interest. Meanwhile, in Astapor, although Ian's new army officers were still in training, the first round of selection of the slave soldiers of the Gi's Legion had already been completed. These people were all selected from the slaves on both sides of the Worm River. As long as they could pass the first phase of training, they would be officially awarded the status of third-class slaves. The eliminated ones would simply be sent back to their hometowns to work, and would not be killed directly according to the tradition of Astapor. According to Rawl, this alone made the slaves grateful. Soon, the first batch of 5,000 slaves entered the former Unsullied military camp in Astapor. The training camp in Astapor was not enough to accommodate more troops, so Ian could only set the number of soldiers selected in the first round at 5,000. In order to ensure the smooth progress of the military expansion, Ian ordered the construction of 3 large military camps outside the city of Astapor, but it would take a long time for these military camps to be ready for use. So Ian withdrew another 2,000 Unsullied from the barracks and stationed them in his 3 pyramids. The good news is that when he was arranging to make room for the new recruits, he was surprised to find that Astapor actually still had a large number of semi-finished Unsullied who were only 3 years away from training. Their number had reached a full 6,000. This was the reason why the good masters promised him that if he waited another year, he would get another 2,000 Unsullied. If these 6,000 people were strictly in accordance with the standards of the Unsullied, there would be at least 2,000 elimination indicators. But for Ian, these semi-finished products that had already gone through the elimination of numbers had all reached the elite standards, so he did not intend to eliminate any of them, nor did he need them to obtain the Unsullied pointed helmets. These people had not passed the most complete Unsullied training, and their loyalty might not reach the level of the Unsullied. Therefore, after selecting all 3,000 semi-finished products over the age of 16, Ian did not mix them into the original Unsullied, but instead organized them into the first legion of GIs. As for the remaining 3,000 semi-finished products that were not old enough, Ian decided to let them continue training until they were of the right age. After dealing with the military expansion, Ian quickly devoted himself to further improving the 5th class slave system. Celia had shown Ian Orange Cat 2 versions of the promotion mechanism before, but Ian was not particularly satisfied with either. One reason was the efficiency of promotion. If the efficiency of promotion was too low, it would be difficult to quickly improve the enthusiasm of the slaves. Ian didn't know what would happen after the long night, so he needed a quick and effective method in a short period of time. But too high a promotion efficiency would devalue the slave level. The value of the slave level is not entirely in the treatment, but also in the comparison. Only when there are enough people under them can the slaves get enough sense of superiority because of the level. In less than a month after the 5th class slave system was released, the number of people who obtained the 3rd class slave status had reached 5,000. After the first training of this batch of slave soldiers is completed next month, this number will be close to 10,000. This made Ian feel fortunate. If it weren't for the false accusations of those bad slaves that made him capture more than 40,000 free people on the Worm River as new slaves, the 3rd class slave class might not be so valuable. For this, Ian's temporary solution is to maintain the high efficiency of promotion and try to continuously add a large number of low-level slaves. After all, according to Lord Fermor, there are more than 4 million slaves in the Lazarin area north of the Slave Bay. Population. When Ian conquers the area, he can easily obtain a huge number of low-level slave resources. Compared with the first point, the second point is much more troublesome for Ian. He found that, no matter how he designed the relevant mechanism, he could not guarantee the fairness of promotion. Because no matter what the mechanism itself is, the final inspection of the results of labor and the arrangement of personnel promotion need to be done by people, and it is well known that people are the most unreliable. Even in the modern era with such advanced information, anti-F is still a huge problem, not to mention this era of information blockage and imperial power not going down to the county. But this problem cannot be solved without solution, and the problem of injustice is fatal. Ian's previous arrangements have made the situation faced by the slaves surrounded by despair everywhere. This promotion mechanism is the only hope Ian left for them, and it is also the key means for Ian to ensure that they work hard for him. However, if the promotion mechanism cannot ensure fairness, and the lower level officials and senior slaves are allowed to collude and manipulate it, the situation of the lower level slaves will become completely desperate, and this despair will make the slaves more dangerous than ever before. Slaves will not be jealous of their masters, but they will be jealous of higher level slaves. Therefore, solving the problem of fairness in promotions has become the top priority of Ian's next work. Chapter 218, the 5th month end settlement. Sitting alone in the study room at the top of the pyramid, Ian waited until late at night. Today is the 6th month settlement day, because another player was eliminated this month. This month is basically Ian's last chance to get rewards from the scoreboard. Unless the player drawn this month can kill the Faceless Man, or is so powerful that the Faceless Man needs more than a month to prepare before taking action. For the latter, Ian didn't have much hope. To be honest, Ian didn't know much about the Faceless Man, and he didn't know what level Jaya-kun was among the Faceless Man. But if Jaya-kun's level is used as the standard of the Faceless Man, even Ian himself doesn't have the confidence to survive a month in the hands of the Faceless Man. At midnight, the system sent a report on time. Congratulations to the player who ranked first in the scoreboard on the 6th month settlement day. The player received rewards. 50 points, 5888 gold dragons, and 1 in the region. Self-selected S-level NPC. Looking at this report, Ian felt a little emotional for some reason, and began to regret whether he had killed too many players in the past. Otherwise he might have been able to receive rewards for a few more months. However, this thought only flashed through his mind. He was actually very clear that the players he had killed before had contributed greatly to his success. After 2 settlements and the 4 simple, optional tasks in the past 2 months, Ian's page became Ian, Strength 35, Agility 31, Mental Power 30 Skills, Etiquette Basics, Common Language Basics, High Valyrian Language Basics, Swordsmanship Proficiency, Horsemanship Advanced, Lance Intermediate, Skin Changer Advanced. Green Seer Basics Attribute Points. 4 Skill Points. 2 points. 349 items. Basic skill scrolls of your choice *2 skill upgrade scrolls *2. PS. After being reminded by a reader, I found that a basic skill scroll given by the Road of Nobility achievement was not counted earlier, so I added it back here. Ian still gave his 4 free attribute points to his mental power, increasing his mental power to 34. Then, Ian looked at the S card given this month. For him now, an S-level NPC can no longer play a big role, so his mentality on this issue has been much calmer. After clicking on the card, Ian once again saw his old friends, Black Goat Cavalry of Koha, and Unsullied Spear Master, who had accompanied him countless times. Ignoring them directly, Ian looked at the 3rd card, Winter Wolf Warrior, Strength 33 to 38, Agility 28 to 34, Spirit 0 to 6 Skills, Advanced Battle Axe, Advanced Mace Equipment, Two-Handed Battle Axe, Hard Leather Armor. What a mess, Ian complained immediately. Are you so short of people in the system? What the hell is the Winter Wolf Warrior? The private guard of the Earl of Barrowton in the north during the Dance of the Dragons, Roderick Dustin. After this army went south, all died in battle, and none of them returned to the north. Yes, Ian had drawn some Raven Teeth guards and warrior sons before, and the auxiliary AI at that time also explained that the organizer trained elite soldiers from various periods in history. But the area marked on your card is in the area. Ian can understand getting Raven Teeth Guard and Warrior's Son in Westeros, but getting Winter Wolves in Astapa? Is it because you can't afford it? If there are really not many NPCs in Essos, you can use the Shadowbinders of Asshai or the Wizards of Karth to make up the numbers. If that doesn't work, you can use the giants from all over the north of the wall. Why did you send such a rubbish card all the way here? The new card was too rubbish, so Ian had no choice but to choose the Black Goat Rider of Koha, who had been following him relentlessly. It can be said that the goodwill finally paid off, and that guy finally got what he wanted. Donor, Strength 38, Agility 32, Spirit 4 Skills, Advanced Scimitar, Advanced Hammer, Advanced Riding, Intermediate Lance. The data is not bad. It's not that no one wants it. This data surprised Ian. He originally thought that the kind of people who kept following him were mostly rubbish with low overall ability, but he didn't expect that this guy was already very good in this profession. After finishing the settlement for the 6th month, Ian wanted to go back to his room to sleep, but at this moment his mind was very clear, and he had no desire to sleep. Unconsciously, Ian strolled to the rooftop garden of the pyramid. Because it was the end of the month, there was only a waning moon in the sky, which made the stars in the sky look more dazzling than when the moon was full. Looking down at the city under his feet, a sense of loneliness inexplicably surged into Ian's heart. Celia had been gone for a while, and Daenerys was too young. As for the Red Saints, temple prostitutes, sent by the Temple of Holy Grace, Ian didn't want to touch them. Bad habits, Ian whispered. Suddenly, a black shadow flashed in front of Ian, and then he heard a dragon roar. Turning around, Ian saw Ian stopped in the middle of the garden, holding a goat that had been bitten to death in his mouth, which was probably the result of his hunting tonight. Walking to Ian, who was eating, Ian gently stroked his head. Ian did not resist, but got used to being close to Ian. When Ian first occupied the body of the black dragon, Ian had a strong resistance. He tried to complain to his mother Daenerys, but when he found that his mother had already surrendered to the enemy, and that the enemy still controlled his food source, he gave up resistance, and began to get close to Ian. However, Ian did not know how long this closeness could last. At this time, Ian's wingspan had reached more than 2 meters, and his skin had begun to have more obvious temperature than before. Ian estimated that, if it grew for another half a year, he might not be able to get close to it as casually as he did now. At the same time, Ian also put the hatching of the second dragon on his agenda. In fact, Ian had already done an experiment for this. He used the body of Krasny Monakros, the former Lord of Astapa, but unfortunately the dragon egg did not react at all. Ian then turned his attention to the Green Saint of the Temple of Grace in Astapa. After all, judging from her position, her blood power should not be much weaker than that of Mary Mazdur. Unfortunately, she was too cooperative. At first, when Ian proposed to use the Pyramid of the Temple of Grace to entertain the unsullied officers, she agreed. Then Ian asked Bronn and his men to make a scene in the Temple of Grace after drinking. Unexpectedly, she sent a group of Red Saints to successfully appease Bronn and his men. Then, the Temple of Grace sent a large number of saints to the Worm River to cooperate with Celia's propaganda activities on the 5th level slavery, claiming that this was a blessing from the Harpy. This made it impossible for Ian to burn her. It would be a pity to burn such a tool with such a high level of consciousness. After all, burning her might not hatch a dragon. If she could, then wouldn't the Green Saints of Yunkai and Meereen be able to do the same? Especially the Green Lady of Meereen, who is a dishonest old witch. In the original book, she took advantage of Daenerys' trust and did many tricks. Anyway, she is one of Ian's must-kill targets, so it is more appropriate to use her for the dragon hatching experiment. However, she will be burned to death after conquering Meereen. So the one Ian really wants to use to hatch the second dragon is the witch Mary Mazdur, who is one of the standard dancers for sacrifice to obtain the dragon in the original book, and is also Ian's primary target for conquering Lazarin. Chapter 219 Miracle. More than 2,000 centaurs gathered at the beach in bewilderment. According to the order of their new master, they were going to witness a miracle here today. These slaves were bought by Celia from Meereen and several Dothraki khals who passed through Meereen. They were all young and strong men. After being defeated in the war, they were captured by the victors and then sold as slaves to the south. The beach was now full of people. Although this miracle was prepared for the centaurs, there were also many nobles of Astapa who came to watch the excitement. Even the city lord Fermor and several senior unsullied instructors who had just been promoted to the head of the family came here. Almost everyone was puzzled by the big pot on the beach and the pipes sticking out from the pointed pot lid. Of course, there was also the sink connected to the pipes. What do you think the Queen of Westeros bought these centaurs for? The unsullied instructor Lysix, who came to the beach to watch the miracle, whispered to Fermor, the new lord of Astapa, beside him. These centaurs are a pile of hot potatoes. Children or women are fine. After all, children are not very old, and they can be trained a little more, and they will be no different from slaves of other nationalities. As for women, no matter what race they are, they can be subdued. but they bought only young and strong people. These idiots can neither farm nor work. Even if you beat them to death, they will not learn to be human. At the same time, they are good at fighting, but not good at gladiatorial combat. Sending them to the arena is also a losing business. Moreover, another unsullied instructor took over. The price of these centaurs is more expensive than any other slaves. The Dothraki Khals claim that the centaurs are nobler than any other nation in the world, so they often offer an outrageously high price when selling these centaurs. All of us swallowed our pride when purchasing these centaurs, and regarded it as protection money paid to the Dothraki. Fortunately, the most important way for the Dothraki tribes to develop is to annex each other. If the annexed captives did not exceed the population carrying capacity of KLSA, it would not be common for them to sell the defeated centaurs as slaves. Otherwise, the slave traders who were unfortunate enough to be encountered by the Khals would have to go bankrupt. And they, the unsullied instructor, looked at Daenerys, Ian and others on the beach with a disdainful smile on his face. They are willing to spend money to buy these centaurs. I guess all the merchants and the entire slave bay took this opportunity to clear out the centaurs in their hands. Can't you see that Andal wants to use these centaur slaves to form cavalry? Lord Fermor interrupted the conversation between his two men. The Dothraki have been skilled in archery and horsemanship since childhood, and are a good material for forming slave cavalry. Now their silver-haired queen already has the best infantry in the world. If we add a cavalry, use Dothraki to form cavalry? Unsullied instructor Lithix was the first to laugh. But if this was really that easy, then centaur slaves would have become popular and sold all over the world. How could they be thrown into everyone's hands like this? Yes, my lord, another unsullied instructor echoed. The Dothraki have a strange custom. The defeated and captured will lose the right to ride a horse, unless the victorious Khal is willing to accept the person as one of his own and allow him to ride a warhorse to wash away the shame. Otherwise they will never touch a warhorse again. They believe that this will curse them, and they will not be able to enter the kingdom of night after death. And these centaurs who were sold as slaves, he pointed at the slaves who were sunbathing on the beach, they are undoubtedly not accepted by the victorious Khal. They won't even touch the horses. How can the silver-haired queen turn them into cavalry? He has dragons. Although his men were discussing Daenerys, the person Fermor was looking at from beginning to end was Ian. A young dragon. If it is put in a cage with my hounds, I bet my dogs can bite it to death in less than 10 minutes, but it can't force the centaurs to surrender. Lexix sneered. Do you know why I brought you here? Fermor asked suddenly. It's impossible to come here to see a joke. Lexix heard Fermor's serious tone and immediately restrained the smile on his face. I can't guess. Another instructor shook his head. Then do you know how the red-robed woman beside the Silver Queen convinced me? Fermor did not answer, but threw out another question. Lexix and the other man looked at each other. The reason why they were persuaded by Celia, in addition to being promised that they could become the heads of the two families after the matter was accomplished, was that their boss Fermor was persuaded first. They didn't know how Fermor was persuaded, but based on their understanding of Fermor, they knew that the current position of the city lord should not be what Fermor pursued. She asked me if I was willing. Fermor began to say, willing? Lexix didn't understand what Fermor was talking about for a moment. She asked me. Fermor's voice was low at this moment, far less loud than when he usually trained the Unsullied, as if he was suppressing some intense emotions. Are you willing to be a slave trader like now? Hiding in a city with a population of less than 100,000 for a lifetime, you can only use the whip in your hand to bully slaves for a lifetime, and you can only wear the golden armor of ancient Ghis during festivals, drive a golden carriage to the arena, to pretend to be a general of Ghis, and show off in front of the civilians, but leave all the subsequent battles to the slaves. Are you willing? She asked again. No. I answered immediately. I'm not willing. I did not choose to lie to her, although I did not know what she wanted to say at that time, but I did not want to lie about this question. I could not lie to myself. Everyone can be satisfied with the current situation of Slavers Bay. Every good lord, every wise lord, every great lord, every Dothraki Khal passing by and the captain coming from the ocean. Everyone is satisfied with the current situation. But you and I cannot. We are the instructors of the Unsullied. We have been studying the military books of Ghis that have been abandoned by the Astor for many years, Since we were young, no one except us will read them anymore. We learn how to train soldiers, how to form a battle array, how to command, and we are trained like the generals of the ancient Ghis Empire. We can train the best infantry in the world, but we are just a group of slave traders. Fermor's words turned into a roar at the end. How can I be willing to accept this? Do you think the Silver Queen can change all this? Lexix suddenly realized. I think her queen's hand, Lord Derry, can change all this. He can help us revive our empire. There was a hint of fanatical admiration in Fermor's tone. He can make us who we should be. Lord Derry? You are so optimistic about him. He looks less than 20 years old. He is a genius. In the past month, I have communicated with him 6 times on tactical issues. Every time I failed miserably. Did you see him wearing a Tokka robe? He is the reincarnation of the great man Graston. He is the salvation of the GI's people brought by the Harpy. He is the miracle itself. Chapter 220 Dracarys. But even so, Lexix didn't know Ian, so he didn't comment on Fermor's comments. That sounded lofty for the time being. He just asked, he is an Andal after all, and all his talents and abilities will be used to fight for the Iron Chair in Westeros, not to revive our Empire of Ghis. Or did he promise you something? Fermor whispered a few words in Lexix's ear. Really? Lexix's eyes widened immediately. Is this credible? How can you guarantee that he didn't intend to leave after defrauding our army? I wasn't sure at first. I was just betting, but now I'm sure, Fermor said with a smile. Lord Derry pushed away all the crops on the east bank of the Worm River, except those that were about to mature, and the land was not suitable for growing wheat, and planted wheat instead. Do you know what this means? It's a very strange decision. No matter how much food he hoards in the slave bay, he can't bring it back to Westeros. Lexix frowned, but he soon figured out the key point. Unless he wants to use troops against Meereen. Meereen is the largest food supplier, and the walls of Meereen are tall and strong. If we want to conquer Meereen without losing our food source, we must be self-sufficient. Fermor smiled. Look, the miracle is about to begin. He didn't continue the previous topic, and pointed to the big pot on the beach. At this time, Ian had already walked to the pot with his black dragon, and 4 Dothraki horses were tied to the sink next to the pot. Are you the chosen representatives? Ian asked, looking at the 20 centaurs in front of him. Miss Andy, the little translator, immediately translated Ian's words into Dothraki. Yes, my lord, replied the NPC bloodguard Quiggo, who was also one of the 20 representatives of the centaurs. Ian had mixed him into this group of centaurs in advance, and ordered the guards to deliberately provide Quiggo with opportunities to fight with other Dothraki. After 3 battles, the bloodguard Quiggo has now become the most prestigious centaur among this group of slaves. With his active cooperation, Ian was able to perform this miracle well. Very good, Ian nodded. Do you see the basins over there? 20 of you go pick up those basins, go to the seashore and fill them with poisoned water, and then fill this pot. Poisoned water cannot be drunk, my lord, a Dothraki representative said hurriedly, after listening to Miss Anders' translation. Even if it is boiled, it cannot be drunk. The reason why poisoned water is called poisoned water is because horses cannot drink it, neither horses nor people. The bloodguard Quiggo hurriedly said his lines. Poisoned water is an ominous thing. I would rather die than touch it. Poisoned water is an ominous thing. Everyone knows it. The other centaurs saw the boss speak and echoed. Everyone knows is a common expression of the Dothraki. Afterwards, the news that Ian wanted the centaurs to go to the sea to fill the poisoned water quickly spread to all the Dothraki slaves behind the representatives, and the centaurs began to stir. If it were not for the spears of the Unsullied outside, they would probably fall into a riot at any time. Poisoned water is an ominous thing. Of course I know. Ian nodded in acknowledgement. After Miss Andy translated loudly, the centaurs became even more agitated. But today, I asked you to come here, so that you can witness this miracle with your own eyes. Ian paused, then raised his voice and said, I will purify the poisonous water. What do you mean by purifying the poisonous water? Quiggo asked cooperatively. I will make the horses drink it. Impossible. You can force people, but you can't force horses. Even if you threaten them in every way, even if you press the horses' heads into the poisonous water, they won't drink it. Quigo continued to cooperate, and at the same time, brought the classic body movements of the Dothraki. Yes, horses don't drink poisonous water. Everyone knows it. Everyone knows it. The Dothraki were noisy. You don't believe me? Yes, of course you don't believe it, because you are a group of cowards, a group of losers, a group of wastes who dare not even touch horses anymore. Ian laughed. The centaurs were instantly enraged, but they couldn't get angry, because every word Ian said was true. For the Dothraki, horses are souls, horses are life, and horses are everything. Even in their customs, everything of a cow, including his wife, can be shared with his blood ridders, except for horses, which belong only to the cow himself. Being deprived of the right to ride a horse is a pain that touches the Dothraki's soul and a shame that they cannot face. And this shame was once again exposed alive by Ian at this moment. You can kill me, but you can't humiliate me. Quigo took a step forward angrily, but was forced back by the spears of the four unsullied behind Ian. I don't kill the trash who can't ride a horse. Ian glanced at Quigo, and was glad that this was a system NPC, otherwise he really couldn't find a centaur to cooperate with him in such a humiliating double act. But I can give you the right to ride a horse again. Riding a horse will bring a curse that prevents us from entering the kingdom of night. Quigo seemed to be a little moved, but still gritted his teeth and said, I said I would purify the poisonous water and let the horses drink it voluntarily. At the same time, I can also purify the curse on you and let you regain the right to ride horses. Ian looked at Quigo. Do you want to bet on this? You won't get a second chance. As long as I can ride a horse again, I'll risk it. Quigo shouted to the centaur slave representatives behind him, then picked up a wooden basin and started walking towards the sea. Under his leadership, the centaurs started to move one after another, and finally all 20 representatives took action, went to the seaside to fetch water, and filled the big pot next to Ian. After that, they all looked at Ian, and Ian immediately ordered his men to cover the lid of the big pot. Now, Ian opened his arms facing the big pot. Let the holy fire purify all the curses. Dracarys. Hearing Ian's order, the black dragon Iron immediately sprayed a dragon flame at the firewood at the bottom of the pot, causing it to burn fiercely. If the wheels don't turn, the wheels will turn. Holy fire. Purify the curse of the poisonous water. Ian cast a spell loudly, waiting for time to pass. Finally, the seawater in the pot began to boil, and the evaporated water vapor entered the copper pipe through the connection on the lid, and then condensed into water again, and flowed into the trough next to it. Because Celia designed the copper pipe to be long enough, the distilled water flowing into the trough had basically cooled down. Gradually, the poisonous water in the pot was almost at the bottom, and the trough was half full. Now, choose 4 of you, lead the 4 horses, and take them to the trough to drink water. Ian gave the order. Is this the poisonous water? Quigo asked in confusion, which was really confusing. You saw it with your own eyes. Ian smiled. The power of the holy fire made the poisonous water flow up and purified it. The centaurs looked at the bottom of the pot in front of them, and then looked at the copper pipe connected to the pot, and where water had been flowing out just now, and nodded to each other, accepting this explanation. Then, Ian looked at everyone, and made a gesture of invitation. Then let me try. Quigo said no more, and led a brown horse to the trough. All the Dothraki people watched this scene with bated breath. Then, the horse put its mouth into the trough, and drank it actively. Quigo first took 2 steps back in disbelief, then quickly rushed to the trough, and buried his head in it to taste it. It's not poisonous. Quigo shouted excitedly. The poisonous water has been purified. The curse has been purified. Quigo shouted while turning over, and riding on the war horse he was leading, speeding towards the centaurs who were watching not far away. He rode in front of them, passed through everyone, and then turned his horse's head, and ran towards Ian. After coming to Ian, Quigo turned over, and got off the horse, half knelt on the ground. Blood of my blood, you purified my curse, and you gave me the opportunity to ride a horse again. I will fight for you until I die. Then, cheers rang out from the centaurs behind him. Miracle, miracle. Chapter 221 Calquig. I accept your loyalty and grant you freedom, Quigo. Ian placed his sword on the shoulder of NPC Quigo. At the same time, I grant you the power to select people from my slaves, to form your own KLSA. Your warriors will fight under my banner and wash away their shame as the defeated with the blood of the enemy. I won't let you down." Quiggo stood up and walked towards the centaur slaves on the side. "Quiggo Cal." A sharp-eyed young centaur was the first to raise his arms and shout. Then, all the centaurs shouted Quiggo's name excitedly. "Ian Derry." At this time, Quiggo shouted Ian's name, "Purifier." The centaurs responded, and they began to shout Ian's name again, the sound waves getting louder and louder, until Ian stretched out his hand and made a stop gesture, and the boiling beach gradually calmed down. "Now, is there anyone else who wants to purify the curse on themselves?" Ian asked loudly. "Drink the purified water, and you will have the right to ride horses again." "Me. I want to." The centaurs rushed to the trough filled with purified water, but were immediately dissuaded by the rows of spears of the Unsullied. "I understand your eagerness to avenge your shame, but unfortunately, this purified water is only enough for 300 people." Ian said regretfully. "You can give us more." A centaur slave representative in the front row said hurriedly. "Yes, I can, but purifying the poisonous water will consume my strength. You haven't proved yourself to me, so why should I help you?" Ian shook his head. "We are like Cal Quiggo. We will fight for you. My enemies are very powerful, they are huge in number, and they wear clothes made of iron. I don't think you have the capital to fight them. Only cowards would wear clothes made of iron." The centaur warrior immediately retorted. "Yes, only cowards would. Everyone knows it." The other centaurs echoed. "It is the custom of the Dothraki to despise wearing armor." Ian believes that there are two main reasons why they have formed this perception. The first is that the Dothraki have no craftsmen and cannot produce armor. The original Dothraki were terrified when they saw the enemy wearing heavy armor. So the Khal at that time declared that the enemy wore armor because of cowards in order to boost morale. Such a cowardly person, no matter how strong the defense is vulnerable in front of the brave roaring warriors. The second is because the Khal's strategy to boost morale worked. They really defeated the enemy wearing iron clothes with courage and cavalry advantages. And because the military technology level of the entire Essos remained in the classical era, the Dothraki were always invincible in a series of battles between chickens, which constantly strengthened their perception that iron clothes were useless, and in the end they were completely fooled by themselves. Now, this perception has become the biggest obstacle for Ian to use them to form a cavalry team. The biggest advantage of the Dothraki is their proficiency in archery and horsemanship and their fearlessness of death, while their disadvantages are their lack of tactics, disregard for discipline and rejection of armor. If they cannot overcome the latter, they will be doomed to fail to meet Ian's requirements for cavalry. The first point of lack of tactics is relatively easy to solve. Although the Dothraki usually fight with pigs, their history shows that they do not reject the use of tactics. Such a story was once told in the official Atlas of A Song of Ice and Fire. After the hero Menj-Kal of the Dothraki first unified the Dothraki, they launched an invasion against King Senna in the San River Basin. The Dothraki assembled 80,000 roaring warriors, commanded by 4 Khals, and Mazo-Alassi, the last supreme king of the Sana, assembled 6,000 scythe chariots, 10,000 heavy cavalry, 10,000 light cavalry and 100,000 infantry outside the capital city of Shannoth to fight a decisive battle with the Dothraki. At the beginning of the battle, the scythe chariots of the Senas advanced directly to the center of the Dothraki army, crushing it with great force. In the melee, they also killed the Khal who commanded the center of the Dothraki army. Then the Dothraki began to flee, and the Sana army took advantage of the victory to pursue them. But when the Sanas loosened their formation due to the pursuit, the fleeing Dothraki suddenly turned their horses and shot a rain of arrows at them. At the same time, their 2 wings were suddenly attacked by 2 other Khals. Saddened by this blow, the Sana army began to collapse, and then frantically retreated to the city of Shannoth behind them. But at this time, they found that the last Dothraki Khal had circled behind them and cut off their retreat back to Shannoth. In the end, the Sana army was annihilated, and 100,000 people died on the battlefield. This battle was known as the Battle of Ravenfields. This is a typical ambush tactic of the Mongols. This strategy is very sophisticated. As long as they are willing to spend a lot of money and are not afraid that the enemy will not be fooled, the Mongols can use it every time. This also shows that when the Dothraki encounter a smart enough cow, they can also fight some very beautiful battles. However, this is also the only place where they can challenge the Mongols. The remaining two shortcomings of the Dothraki, ignoring discipline and rejecting armor, doomed them to be pure scum compared to the Mongols. Without extremely high discipline, they could not learn the tactics used by the Mongols, such as the crow soldier scattering stars, the cavalry encirclement and breakthrough, the arrow cavalry coordination, and the lava. Even the ambush tactics used by Mengo Callan history are not a small challenge for the current horsemen. The Dothraki's rejection of armor is even more extreme than that of the Mongols. The Mongols learned wherever they went. The heavy armor and gunpowder of the Central Plains, the counterweight slingshot of Arabia, the most advanced technology in the world at that time, were all learned by the Mongols and used in war. As for the Dothraki, just how to convince them to put on armor was a headache for Ian for a long time. Generally speaking, the best way to make a nation accept a certain weapon of war that they reject is to hurt them with it, so that they know that they really can't do it without it. For example, the stirrup that changed the history of cavalry. After the stirrup invented by China drove away the Turks in the north, the Turks took the stirrups with them and moved westward, and beat the Sakas and Sassanid Persians for hundreds of years, respectively, and finally made these noble cavalrymen who initially thought that stirrups are just toys for those who are not good at riding use stirrups honestly. Another example is the strange tricks that knocked on the door of the King dynasty. I won't say much about this, it's all tears. But unfortunately, Ian had no way to get an armored legion to beat the Dothraki, and he didn't have time to beat the Dothraki for decades, to force them to take the initiative to really smell. So in the end, Ian chose this method of picking a great god. Here are 300 breastplates. Ian ignored the centaur's objection that only cowards wear iron clothes. Now, whoever puts on one first will receive a portion of purified water and the right to enter Calquigos KLSA. They will become my first batch of royal guards, each with 3 horses. Ian paused, and the others will be sent back to farm. When Ian finished his last sentence, the centaurs began to rush to the armor. What's the use of cowards? It's better than being a serf, right? Chapter 222, KUI Lizard. Lord Derry, I had a dream yesterday. Daenerys said to Ian, while cutting a piece of ham. They were having breakfast in the garden at the top of the pyramid. The Jith people in Slavers Bay prefer dog meat. They believe that pigs and cows are unclean foods. Ian was eager to gain the recognition of the Jith people and quickly adapted to their diet, but Daenerys still retained her original eating habits. Dragon dream? Hearing Daenerys' words, Ian thought to himself. Daenerys rarely talked to Ian about her dreams, and he guessed that there was something special about her dream last night. Did your majesty dream of me? Ian teased casually. I dreamed of a strange woman, and she said something very strange to me. Daenerys said after hesitating for a while. Strange woman. Strange words? Well, she wore a red lacquered mask. Daenerys nodded. Quay lizard? That's trouble. For Ian now, the last thing he wants to do is to deal with these unknown mysterious beings. After all, he now has a great advantage over other players in physics. If there were no annoying mysterious forces involved, he would have a great chance of winning now. And the lizard is one of the most mysterious and unknown things in the original book. No one knows her identity. No one knows her purpose. No one knows whether she is an enemy or a friend. The few times she appears are to give prophecies, and her prophecies are surprisingly fulfilled. What did she say? Ian asked hurriedly. To go north, you must go south. To reach the west, you must go east. To move forward, you must retreat. To get to the light, you must go through the shadows. Daenerys repeated the content of the dream, and the dream was very clear, so clear that she could remember every word the other party said. It was indeed the lizard. Ian narrowed his eyes, and even this prophecy was exactly the same as the original book. Is it that her prophetic ability cannot detect the changes caused by the players? Or is it that the changes she has made so far are not enough to shake this prophecy? From the literal meaning, this passage seems to be persuading Daenerys to go to Asshai. In the original book, when Daenerys asked Quelix what she could get in Asshai, Quelix also replied, the truth. But according to the content of the 5th volume, A Dance with Dragons, the possibility of Daenerys actually going to Asshai next to the Shadowland in the original book is close to 0. Other readers interpret this prophecy as follows. Daenerys wants to return to Westeros in the west, but she went to the Slavers' Bay first, so she must go east. In the 5th volume, the Dornish are seeking an alliance with Daenerys. If their alliance is reached, Daenerys lands in Dorne, and then she must go south. As for having to retreat, and having to go through the shadow, there are even more different opinions. Ian can't judge which situation it is now. Even compared to the original book, Ian feels that for Daenerys now, the possibility of her following him to Asshai in the future has risen to a high level. Ian? Daenerys called Ian by name this time. What's wrong with you? You don't look well. It's okay, Your Majesty. Ian shook his head quickly, temporarily abandoned those fantasies, and stuffed a piece of mutton into his mouth. Do you know what this passage means? Seeing that Ian had returned to normal, Daenerys put down her worries and asked, why do you think I can understand what someone in your dream said? Ian pulled the corner of his mouth. Haha, Daenerys laughed embarrassedly. Sorry, I just subconsciously. After all, Ian, you always know everything. Compared to this passage itself, I care more about. Ian looked at Daenerys. Are you sure that it was a dream? Ian's suspicion is not unreasonable. After all, in the original book, Daenerys first saw Khaleesi in person. When Daenerys saw her for the second time, although she suspected that it was just a dream because of Khaleesi's sudden appearance and disappearance, it is also possible that Khaleesi actually knows some kind of magic that can achieve this effect. After all, she is a Shadowbinder. Moreover, in the original novel, Khaleesi set out after the birth of the dragon and found Daenerys in the Red Wasteland. If she set out again when the dragon was born this time, it would be understandable that she arrived in Astapor and found Dany at this time. Are you sure? Daenerys was stunned for a moment. What else could it be if not a dream? My room is dozens of meters high, and there are 4 unsullied guards at the door. Do you suspect that someone can sneak into my room? Daenerys said, and suddenly opened her eyes wide. What did you think of? Ian asked hurriedly. I remembered the background of that dream. It was really my room. The woman wearing a mahogany lacquer mask was standing by the window. She disappeared immediately after she said those words, so I thought it was a dream. Daenerys suddenly felt a little scared. Ian also felt a chill in his heart. Can the Shadowbinder really do such a thing? Exclamation mark. Although in the original book, Melisandre summoned the Shadow Killer by sacrificing the child she was pregnant with for Stannis and killed Renly Baratheon, that was accomplished by the most powerful wizard in the world of ice and fire through expensive sacrifices. If other Shadowbinders can sneak into a heavily guarded room at will through magic, then even now, I'm at risk of being beheaded by a well-developed wizard player. This news is too bad. No, that's a dream. Ian comforted. Regardless of the position of the lizard, at least until the part of the original book that has been published, she has not tried to hurt Daenerys, and Ian does not have to worry about the hostility from this mysterious Shadowbinder for the time being. As for other players, Ian thought of this, hurriedly finished the breakfast, and said goodbye to Daenerys. After returning to the room, Ian logged into the system, spent a basic skill self-selected scroll to learn the basics of the Red God Priest, and then upgraded it and the Green Prophet to the primary level. The updated data card is Ian, Strength 35, Agility 31, Spirit 34 skills, Etiquette Basics, Common Language Basics, High Valyrian Language Basics, Swordsmanship Proficiency, Horsemanship Advanced, Lance Intermediate, Skin Changer Advanced, Green Seer Elementary, Red God Priest Elementary. Attribute points 0 skill points, 1 points. 349 items. Basic skill scroll of your own choice. Skill upgrade scroll *2. Although the elementary magic skills do not have much practical value, it at least allows him to understand what this system of magic has. In this way, he can prepare in advance for those skills that may threaten him, so as not to be caught off guard when the crisis comes. Recently, the old communities in the city are diverting rainwater and sewage, and the construction is carried out until after 9 o'clock every night. It is just downstairs from my house. The noise is too loud and affects my writing, so the update time is getting later and later. Chapter 223, Throne Room Conference. The throne room was a sea of armor, swords, and bright cloaks. More than half of the great nobles from the Crownlands, Stormlands, and Southland gathered at the back of the hall, standing under the high windows. Robert Baratheon sat high above everyone, on the iron throne covered with blades and thorns, wearing a long-lost staghorn helmet and a set of silver plate armor specially made for a man of his size. He laughed loudly at the courtiers around him, just as he was when he hammered Rhaegar by the trident. Varys, who was beside him, was wearing a lavender brocade robe and answered his various questions in a low voice, while the High Septon on the other side of him could not get into the conversation, but just shook his head, and the crystal crown on his head emitted colorful rainbow light. The first to enter was Stannis Baratheon, the Duke of Dragonstone, King Robert's second brother. He was born with broad shoulders, strong limbs, a tight face, and skin as hard as iron after long exposure to the scorching sun. This is a time-tested commander who has proven his military talent many times in the War of the Usurper and in suppressing the rebellion of Balon Greyjoy. He is also the commander of the Royal Army that Robert will appoint today, although Robert is very reluctant. Just half a month ago, Robert received a letter from the north. Eddard Stark informed him of a bad news. The wildlings north of the wall united under the leadership of a guy who called himself the King Beyond the Wall. They received assistance from nowhere and formed a well-equipped vanguard. These people passed through the unknown secret passages under the wall and went around to the rear of the Night's Watch. When Eddard Stark received the news, the three castles of the wall, Shadow Tower, Black Castle and Eastwatch, had all fallen. Finally, the Umber family of Hearth City sent crows to Winterfell for help, claiming that the number of wildlings was as high as 100,000, and they were marching from north to south. This forced Eddard Stark, who had already brought the army to the Moat of Caelin, to consider bringing troops back for help and wrote a letter asking for Robert's forgiveness. Robert couldn't refuse Eddard Stark on the issue of defending the north, so he had to agree to his request. The problem that followed was that Robert had to reselect the commander-in-chief of the Royal Army. His foster father Jon Arryn had been poisoned by the Lannister couple, and the Vale had not responded to the royal call so far. His best friend Eddard Stark was held back by the wildlings and could not go south, so he only sent a few nobles and their people to come to the king. Hoster Tully, the Duke of Riverrun, who had revolted with him that year, was ill because his army in the Riverlands was raided by the main force of the West led by Jaime Lannister a month ago and was almost destroyed, which aggravated his condition, and he was bedridden. At this moment, Robert had few choices on the issue of military commander, and there were only 3 people who had the ability and reputation to do so. The second brother, Stannis Baratheon, the Duke of Dragonstone, Randyll Tarly, the Earl of Hornhill, the most famous general in the south, and Prince Oberyn Martell, who came to King's Landing alone when Dorne did not send troops to the king, wanting to avenge his sister Elia Martell. In addition, even the living legend, Barristan the Fearless of the King's Guard, was not enough to support this great task. Even if Robert disliked his brother, he had no reason to bypass him and choose his commander from the latter two. Your Majesty, the army of the crown has been assembled. Stannis knelt down in front of the Iron Throne and saluted. His expression was always so serious that people wondered if he had forgotten how to smile. Brother, the Stormlands will fight for you. Robert's third brother, Renly Baratheon, the Duke of Storm's End, stood beside Stannis and was at the same level as him, not lagging behind Stannis according to age. Behind the two deer stood the famous knights from the Crownland in the Stormlands. Renly did not address the king as his majesty like his second brother, but directly addressed him as a brother, with a smile on his face. From Robert's expression, it can be seen that he likes Renly much more than Stannis. But war cannot be decided by preference after all, and Renly cannot be a commander, no matter how likable he is. Stannis Baratheon, Robert also called his second brother by his name. I appoint you as the commander-in-chief of the royal army, and you will lead my army to the west to suppress the rebellion. I swear to break through Casterly Rock and bring the rebels of the Lannister family to King's Landing to be judged by law. Stannis swore immediately. Then there was a burst of applause in the throne room, and the nobles shouted Stannis' name. No one likes him, but this is a procedure. Then the roll call officer announced the entry of Mace Tyrell, Duke of Highgarden. It is said that he was tall and strong in the past, but now he is a little fat, but handsome as always. His two sons, Ser Loras the Knight of Flowers and his brother Garland the Valiant, followed closely behind. All three of them wore green velvet robes trimmed with sable fur. Garland and Loras were the second and third sons of Lord Mace, respectively. Their eldest brother Willis Tyrrell stayed in Highgarden because of a crippled knee. The culprit for Willis's cripple was a Baron Martell, the Prince of Dawn, who was standing in the hall at the moment. As a result, the two brothers cast unfriendly glances at him after entering the hall. "The Reach fights for you, Your Majesty." Lord Mace Tyrrell naturally did not have time to do other things like his two sons. He walked straight to the Iron Throne and saluted Robert. Behind the Tyrrell family were several great nobles in the south, including Paxter Adwine, Lord of the Arbor, Lord Mattis Rowan, who was wearing a snow-white shirt, the thin and bald Lord Randall Tolley, and Lord of Oldtown, Lord Leighton Hightower. The Reach is the second largest kingdom among the 7 kingdoms after the North. Due to its rich resources and dense population, its actual strength ranks first among the 7 kingdoms. As for the earls standing in front of the Iron Throne, the number of troops each of them can recruit is close to that of a duke in other kingdoms. Mace Tyrrell came to King's Landing with this Linoop this time, naturally with a great purpose. "Welcome to you from afar. The royal family will never forget your loyalty and bravery." Robert said, a rare polite remark. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Lord Mace Tyrrell smiled and replied, "We are here this time, in addition to responding to Your Majesty's call to be loyal to the royal family, we also have a request." "What request do you have? Just say it, I will definitely agree." Robert said generously, "This is not a question that needs to be thought about. It is difficult for you to refuse any request from anyone who wants to fight for you with an army of 100,000. Seeing Robert so straightforward, Mace Tyrrell's face was full of joy. "I have a daughter, Margaret, who is still unmarried. She is the apple of our eye. Margaret heard of your great achievements and was fascinated by your wisdom, courage, and chivalry. She fell in love with you. I beg you to bring her to King's Landing today to marry our two families and create a glorious future together." Mace Tyrrell proposed immediately. For a moment, Robert frowned deeply. He did not expect that the Tyrrell family would want to propose a marriage at this time. He turned his head away and said nothing. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 224 Humiliation. Varys, who was standing next to Robert, was very satisfied with the situation. He had long guessed the purpose of the Tyrrells' visit, but he had never spoken to remind Robert just to wait for this moment. If the Tyrrells really reached a marriage with the Iron Throne, then his Egon and the Golden Company would no longer have any chance. Lord Tyrrell, Varys still pretended to help out. "The country is at war, and it seems inappropriate to talk about marriage now, right? The king's marriage and heirs are the key to the stability of the country, and they cannot be delayed for long." Mace refused on the spot. He was not stupid. If he didn't put forward conditions now before the war was over, why would he put forward conditions after the war was over? The royal wedding can naturally be postponed until after the victory, but the marriage contract can be set in advance. Ha ha ha. Just when Robert didn't know how to perfunctorily pass it over, a discordant laugh rang out in the throne room. Everyone looked for the source of the laughter and found a Baron Martell leaning against a pillar. "Lord Tyrrell, I advise you not to waste your energy. Don't you know? His Majesty brought back a winter snow rose from the north this time, and the position of Queen has long been reserved for her." A Stark. Duke Mace was a little confused for a moment. The reason why he could confidently propose a marriage plea was because he knew that the Stark family had no women of marriageable age. "No, that's just the daughter of a small noble family in the north." A Baron sneered. Dawn and the Reach were old enemies, so he would not miss such an opportunity to humiliate the Tyrrell family. "By the way, her brother is Ser Rolland, the King's Guard, standing in front of you." Hearing this, the faces of the nobles in the Reach instantly turned extremely ugly. It was a scandal to reject Tyrrell's marriage request for a small noble. So, everyone looked at Robert on the Iron Throne. Your Majesty, you have already agreed to my request in advance, Mace said. I hope you can clarify this malicious rumor with bad intentions. When he spoke, he glared at Oberyn fiercely. But it was the words of the Duke of Mace that instantly angered Robert, who had originally intended to cover up the matter. I promised you in advance, because I didn't know you would make such a request, my lord. Robert did not use extreme words. He knew that he still needed to rely on the group of people in front of him to fight, but his tone was already full of the majesty of a king. I can only regret to tell you that what Prince Oberyn said is not a rumor. As early as when I was in the north, I had already promised the position of queen to someone else. Although I personally look forward to the marriage with the Tyrell family, I'm serious. Don't mention this matter again in the future. An open refusal in front of all the great nobles in the crown, the south, and the Stormlands. An open humiliation, preferring to fulfill the promise to an unknown little noble, rather than the humiliation of marrying the Tyrell family, as if mocking the fact that the Tyrell family was once just the chief steward of the Gardener family of the River King. People always like to mock the free family of the twins as Navorish with only 800 years of history, but the real rise of the Tyrell family is less than 300 years. After the Targaryen family conquered Westeros, they saw that the Tyrell family had no influence as the stewards of the old king, so they made them the guardians of the south. They are the real Navorish. If Robert's new queen is really Eddard Stark's sister or daughter, Mace Tyrell will accept it. But what is that Winter Snow Rose? A small noble in the north. A small noble is also a noble? The bloody wound was torn open, and Duke Mace Tyrell was almost trembling. I brought 100,000 troops to come to the king, and this is your answer to me, Robert Baratheon. Duke Mace was vain and lacked political skills. He was often called inflatable fish lord behind his back. At this moment, he was so humiliated that he forgot the most basic etiquette between the monarch and his subjects for a moment and left directly. What made him feel even more humiliated was that only his two sons and the Redwyne family to which his mother belonged followed him out of the scene, while the other great nobles of the southern border stayed where they were. At this moment, the weakness of the Tyrell family's influence was undoubtedly exposed. Astapor sent these centaurs to the barracks to learn formations? The unsullied instructor Lexix asked in confusion. I don't quite understand what you mean, my lord. The Dothraki are not good at fighting on foot, and they are all barbaric, unruly, and disobedient. It makes no sense for them to receive Ghis training. Ever since he heard the praise of Ian by the city lord Fermor on the coast of Astapor, and witnessed Ian's miracle of taming the centaur slaves, Lexix has developed a strong admiration for Ian. He did not dare to refute Ian loudly, and could only raise his objections tactfully. Barbaric, unruly, and disobedient slaves are not qualified to be my cavalry. What I want you to train is their obedience, Ian explained. Practice obedience? Yes, I want you to organize them into teams of 10 and 100, select decapitators and centurions, and then start training the formation. You have to tell them that whichever team of 100 first obeys orders can obtain the purified water I provide, and then obtain the right to fight on horseback. I don't need Dothraki barbarians, I need Mongolian cavalry. If that's the case, Lysix recalled the scene of the centaur slaves shouting miracle before. If it is for the right to ride a horse, then I think their resistance should be much less. Go do it, my friend. You speak Valyrian so fluently, I can't believe you started learning this language after you came to Astapor. Lysix accepted the order and said before leaving, I have always been very talented in learning. Ian smiled. I didn't expect that I had started learning half a year ago. Watching Lysix walk to the drill ground and start organizing the Dothraki, Ian leaned on the guardrail of the high platform and sighed softly. Training the obedience of the centaurs in this way was not his first choice. The reason why he wanted to do this was because he was running out of money. Although Ian brought more than 100,000 gold dragons with him when he came to Astapor and seized property worth 50,000 to 60,000 gold dragons in the operation on the Worm River, he then hinted that the Temple of Grace in Astapor and several major families donated 70,000 to 80,000 gold coins, light gold coins minted by Meereen, weighing about 1/3 of a gold dragon, to him. But the money was still used up in just 2 months. According to Ian's plan, a formal cavalryman needs to have at least a batch of war horses and 2 marching horses. If there is enough, it would be better to have 2 pack horses. Ian does not need to equip the cavalry with pack horses for the time being, but just to equip the 2,700 centaurs he has already bought with horses, the budget will reach more than 40,000 gold dragons, not including their weapons, armor and subsequent maintenance costs. Such a large expense is absolutely impossible for Ian, who is busy farming, and even if it can be taken out, it is not such a high priority. Instead of spending a lot of money to buy qualified war horses everywhere, it is better to find a way to secretly overthrow a few small Dothraki KLSA and get horses from them. After all, for such a large expense, the only way is to get it for free. Chapter 225, The Envoy of Ghis. The candle gradually melted and burned out, and the dawn shone into the room through the green glass skylight on the top of the pyramid. Ian fell asleep while working, and various documents covered his desk and piled up like a mountain. He originally thought that he would be free after leaving most of the work to Celia, but it turned out that he thought too much. The problem of training soldiers alone has occupied most of Ian's time. The command mechanism of this world is too backward. Even the Unsullied who have completed the most rigorous training cannot accept flexible command. This made Ian spend a lot of time and energy to optimize their organization problems and let other Astapor instructors use this as a benchmark to train the newly formed Gith Legion slaves. Then there is the problem of iron smelting factories and armor factories. Celia has gone to the upper reaches of the Worm River to engage in agriculture, so these factories left near the city have become Ian's work again. In terms of the current steel production and the delivery speed of the armor factory, it is basically a fantasy for Ian to arm all his infantry within 2 years. To achieve this goal, he needs to expand the factory by at least 3 times the current scale. Of course, he can't afford this money. In addition, controlling his falcons and wildcats to search for the whereabouts of the lizard in the city also took up some of Ian's energy. All this made him faint from exhaustion while working in the study yesterday. After getting up and stretching his muscles, Ian walked to the window and breathed a breath of fresh air. Then, he heard a knock on the door. "Come in." Ian responded. There were Unsullied guarding outside his door. The only ones who could knock on the door without being notified by the Unsullied were his NPCs. Even Daenerys and Celia did not have this authority. "My lord," it was the water dancer Yada who pushed open the door. "Lord Fermor invites you to the pyramid of the Nakros family to discuss matters. It stands to reason that, if he has something to do, he should take the initiative to come to see me." Ian raised his eyebrows. Such an invitation was somewhat unconventional. Ghis sent an envoy, and the other party specifically asked to see you by name. Yada explained for Fermor. "The messenger from Ghis. Such a big thing happened in Astapor, but Meereen and Yunke did not send messengers, but the messenger from Ghis came first. It seems that they are here to protest." "What are they protesting?" "I don't know." Yada shook her head. "Do you need me to arrange your trip?" "No, if they must see me, let them come here." Ian chuckled. "If they ask me to go by name, wouldn't I be very embarrassed?" "Yes, my lord." Yada took the order and left. After that, Ian called the servant for a breakfast, which contained the traditional dog meat and mutton of Slaver Bay. Ian himself did not reject this eating habit, but this animal husbandry style in Slaver Bay was very unfavorable to Ian's military expansion plan. He wanted to train more elite soldiers, and the protein provided by meat would be very important. But in the short term, Ian could not come up with a solution to this problem, so he had to shelve the plan to provide meat to the army. After breakfast, Ian dealt with documents for a while before Yada returned to his study at the top of the pyramid to inform him that the envoy of Ghis, Reggie MD, wanted to see him. "This is Lord Reggie MD, the treasurer of Ghis, and he is also the envoy of Ghis to visit Astapor this time." After the two Ghis entered the door, the translator, who was obviously a slave, introduced the envoy beside him to Ian in the common language. Reggie MD had a very typical Ghis appearance, with amber skin, hair in the shape of 2 demon horns, and wearing a toca robe with golden tassels. "This is Lord Ian Derry, the Queen's Hand of Her Majesty Daenerys, the Apostle of the Red God, the Dragon Caller, and the Protector of Astapor." Since the little translator was not there, Yada acted as a roll call officer. Respected Lord Derry, Regenda did not show any of the usual arrogance of the Gith people and used honorifics to Ian. There is one thing I don't understand. As an Andal knight serving the Valyrian Dragon King, why do you believe in the Red God? Reg's translator was about to speak when he was interrupted by Ian in advance. I'll learn Valyrian after coming to Astapor, so we can communicate directly without slaves. Your Valyrian sounds fluent. You are really gifted. Regenda immediately complimented. Have you heard the story of me purifying the poisonous water on the beach and conquering those centaurs? I have heard of it. It was a miracle. This is why I believe in the Red God. There is power in the flame. Real power. Ian replied. In fact, he had another intention. To promote his belief in the Red God, which was to send a signal to the Red God that I was working for you. After all, I stole the Red God's most important chess piece, Daenerys, and it is likely that I have disrupted many of the Red God's plans. If I don't give the Red God an illusion that I can be won over by him, I'm afraid that I will attract his crazy targeting. Although the god in the world of ice and fire may not have a direct impact on the human world, being targeted is not a good thing after all. Therefore, Ian's initial solution is to tell everyone that he is working for the Red God, but he just doesn't help the Red God to preach and see the Red God's reaction first. If the Red God is really sincere, then there is nothing wrong with cooperating with him. Anyway, my goal is not to last for thousands of years, but to get full points or kill all other players. But if the Red God is not sincere or even hostile, then I can only find a way to cut off his source of income and establish another Red God. I believe that you are not coming to me this time to discuss religious issues, right? Ian saw that Reggie MD was lost in thought and quickly changed the subject. It was still unclear whether the Red God was a friend or foe, and Ian was afraid that if he continued to talk, he would accidentally brainwash the new Ghis treasurer into a believer of the Red God. Oh, of course. Reggie MD finally reacted and stated his purpose. I came to you this time to protest against your calling the new slave army the Ghis army. The real Ghis army must be composed of free people. It is a humiliation to the ancient Ghis empire to let a group of slaves who are not even Ghis, form the so-called Ghis army. Does the ancient Ghis empire still need to be humiliated? Even if I wanted to whip its corpse, it would have been gone long ago, Ian complained. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.